If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. I still hear them sometimes, the whispers. Even now, 10 years later, miles away from Pisgah. The doctors say it's just the wind or my mind playing tricks. But I know better. I was there in '76 when the trees revealed what they truly were. My name is Robert Washington, Bobby to most folks. I took the ranger job at Pisgah National Forest to escape the memories of Vietnam. 2 tours left me with more than just the burn scars on my left arm. The forest was supposed to be quiet, peaceful. I was wrong. Whisper Grove wasn't marked on any tourist maps. Tucked away in the heart of Pisgah, you could only reach it by a single dirt fire road or an 18-mile hike that would break most city folks. The pines there grew different, too close together, like they were huddling, sharing secrets. And the fog. The damn fog hung around no matter how bright the sun shined or how hard the wind blew. My boss, Senior Ranger Frank Phillips, had been working these woods for almost 30 years. Salt and pepper beard, weathered face that had seen everything, or so he thought. He loved to tell visitors about the Civil War skirmish where soldiers from both sides vanished without a trace. The forest claimed them, he'd say with a wink. I used to think it was just a story to spook campers. That summer, America was celebrating its 200th birthday. Red, white, and blue decorations hung in every town around the forest. People were flocking to national parks, wanting to connect with real America. If only they knew what was waiting in those woods. First time I noticed something was off was during a routine patrol with Frank. We were checking on weekend campers, making sure no idiots were setting off fireworks in the dry season. Frank, I crazy, or was that cluster of pines further back last week? I asked, pointing to a group of trees near the trail bend. He squinted, then shrugged. Woods play tricks on your eyes, Bobby, especially for folks who've seen what you've seen. I nodded and popped one of my anxiety pills. The VA doctor said my hypervigilance was just the PTSD talking. Every shadow becoming an enemy, every sound a potential threat. But my military training had kept me alive in the jungle. And something about those trees set off the same alarms in my head. Later that day, we helped a lost Boy Scout troop find their way back to the main trail. Their compasses were going haywire, spinning like tops. The forest was talking to us, one of the younger boys said, while his troop leader rolled his eyes. Kids and their imagination, the leader said, but Frank gave me a look I couldn't quite read before telling them. Local folks say some trees around here walk at night. Been saying it since before my granddaddy's time. That night in my cabin, I looked over my notes. Several pines had grown almost 2 inches in a week. That wasn't normal, not even close. Little did I know this was just the beginning. The forest was waking up, and it was hungry for more than just sunlight and rain. I woke up around midnight to a sound like someone whispering my name. Not loud, just a soft Bobby that could have been the wind, but the air was still that night. Grabbing my flashlight and service revolver, I stepped outside. The beam cut through darkness, but showed nothing unusual. Just as I was about to head back in, my light caught something shiny on the doorframe. Fresh sap, still sticky, in the perfect shape of a handprint. Just an animal, I told myself, but my heart was pounding like artillery fire. Morning brought a family of campers to the station, their kids wide-eyed with fear. There are faces in the trees, the little girl said, clutching her teddy bear. They watch us when we sleep. Her father looked embarrassed. Sorry, Ranger. She's been having nightmares. No problem, I said, giving the girl a junior ranger badge. Sometimes our minds see patterns in nature. But when I checked their campsite later, I found something that made my skin crawl. Pine cones and twigs arranged in a perfect circle around where they'd slept. Not random, deliberate. and carved into a nearby tree was a crude shape that looked almost like a person. The family packed up early, but not before the mother pulled me aside. "I'm not usually one for ghost stories," she whispered, "but I dreamed the forest was asking me to stay, to become part of it." She rolled up her sleeve to show me thin scratches running up her arm. I woke up with these, reaching toward a tree in my sleep. When I told Frank about it back at the station, he seemed off, distracted, kept rubbing his chest through his uniform shirt. "You feeling okay?" I asked. "Just an itch," he said, but when he stretched, I glimpsed something under his collar. "What?" "Looked like pine needles somehow embedded in his skin. You've got something." I reached toward his neck. He jerked away. "It's nothing." Then calmer. "Just forest debris. You know how it gets everywhere." That afternoon, a group of college students hiking through reported, unusually aggressive squirrels and birds that seemed to be herding them deeper into the grove. "And the trees," one girl said. "This sounds crazy." But they weren't in the same places when we tried to backtrack. As they left, Frank offered to walk them to the trail junction. When he returned hours later, he was covered in sap and walking stiffly. "Got turned around," he explained, not meeting my eyes. "Damn compass. Frank had worked these woods for 3 decades. He never got lost." That night, I took my flashlight and checked his office after he'd gone home. His desk calendar had strange markings, tally marks counting down to something starting a month ago, and a note scribbled in handwriting that didn't quite look like Frank's. "They're ready for more of us." I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind carried whispers just below the level I could understand. But worst of all was the silence in between, like the forest was holding its breath, waiting. Morning arrived with pounding on my door. 4 college students, one of them crying. "Our friend Josh is missing," said a tall guy with glasses. "We were camping at Blue Ridge site. He went for a night hike and never came back. I grabbed my gear and radio. When did you last see him?" "Around midnight," the crying girl said. "He wanted to take night photos of the stars." I called Frank, who showed up looking worse than yesterday. His skin had a grayish tint, and he moved like his joints hurt. "Let's organize a search party," I said. "I'll call in some volunteers." By noon, we had 8 people split into teams. Frank insisted on leading one group himself. "We'll cover more ground," he said, his voice raspy. "Take the north section. I know a shortcut through the valley." Something felt wrong, but I didn't argue. We agreed to check in by radio every hour. My group included 2 of Josh's friends and a local hunter who'd volunteered. The forest seemed different today, darker despite the sun overhead. Birds weren't singing. "The trail should fork up ahead," I said after an hour of hiking, but it didn't. Where a clear path had been last week, now dense underbrush blocked the way. "That's impossible," I muttered, checking my map. My radio crackled. Frank's voice came through with static. "Any sign of the boy?" "Ooh," then something that sounded like, "The Grove wants," before cutting out. "Frank?" "Repeat that last part," I said, but got only static. The hunter pointed to the ground. "Tracks here, heading east." We followed them to a clearing I'd never seen before. Josh's backpack lay open, contents scattered. His camera was still intact. "Let me see that," I said, turning it on. The photos started normal. Campfire, friends laughing, night sky. Then Josh had taken shots of the trees. In each one, barely visible between trunks, were shapes. Human-like but wrong somehow, too tall, too still. In the last photo, one seemed to be looking directly at the camera, with hollow spaces where eyes should be. My hands shook as I handed back the camera. "What are those things?" Josh's friend whispered. Before I could answer, my radio came alive, with screams. Then Frank's voice, calm. "False alarm. Just a volunteer who tripped. We're heading back to regroup." When we met at the ranger station 2 hours later, Frank arrived alone. "Where are your volunteers?" I asked. "They wanted to check another trail," he said too quickly. They'll be back soon. As he turned away, I noticed something on his neck. Pine. Needles. Not resting on his skin, but growing from it. No blood, no redness. Like they belonged there. That evening, another volunteer reported hearing someone calling his name from deep in the woods. Sounded exactly like my wife, he told me, but she's in Charlotte. As darkness fell, the wind picked up, whistling through the trees. To everyone else, it probably sounded normal, but to me, it sounded exactly like the Huey helicopters in Vietnam. Right before an ambush, my heart raced. Sweat soaked my shirt. The trees, the darkness, the sounds. Suddenly, I wasn't in Pisgah anymore, but back in the jungle, with enemies hiding everywhere. Bobby, you okay? Someone touched my shoulder. I spun. Around, ready to fight before reality snapped back. Just Josh's friend looking concerned. Yeah, I lied. Let's keep searching. But in my gut, I knew we weren't the ones doing the hunting anymore. Night fell faster than it should have. The forest seemed to swallow the last light, leaving us with just our flashlights cutting through the darkness. We should head back, I told the remaining volunteers. Resume at first light. That's when we heard it, a cry for help, faint but clear. We rushed toward the sound, entering a clearing I didn't recognize. In the center stood one of our volunteers, Bill, a local fishing guide. He wasn't moving, not even blinking. Bill? I approached slowly. You okay, buddy? When my light hit his face, I nearly dropped my flashlight. Something was growing across his cheek, rough and ridged like bark, spreading from his ear toward his mouth. His eyes were open but empty. We need to get him to a doctor, Josh's friend said, reaching for Bill. That's when Bill moved. Not like a person, but like a puppet with stiff limbs. His hand shot out, grabbing the college kid's wrist with crushing strength. The boy screamed. I pulled my revolver. Let him go, Bill. Bill's head turned toward me with a sound like cracking wood. His mouth opened, but the voice wasn't his. The forest provides, he said in a voice that sounded like rustling leaves. I fired a warning shot into the air. Bill released the boy but started walking toward me with jerky steps. Stay back, I shouted. A twig snapped behind me. I spun around to see Frank emerging from the trees, but it wasn't really Frank anymore. His eyes were just hollow knots in his face. His skin had hardened, taking on the texture and color of pine bark. When he moved, I could hear creaking, like branches in wind. Bobby, Frank said, his voice a dry whisper, don't fight it. They only want to help. What happened to you? I backed away, keeping my gun raised. I've been chosen, Frank said. We become eternal this way, part of something greater. He raised his arm, now more branch than limb. The whispering ones have waited so long. They need more of us. As he spoke, I noticed other shapes emerging from the trees, twisted forms that were neither fully human nor fully plant. Some I recognized as the missing volunteers. Others were older with faces barely human anymore. The war poisoned you, Bobby, Frank continued, made you afraid. But fear ends when you join with the forest. No more pain, no more memories. This is insane, I said, still backing up. We tried with the soldiers first, Frank said, during the war. But they fought too hard. Now we understand. Gentle persuasion works better than force. My back hit something. Solid. A tree that hadn't been there seconds ago. I felt something wet and sticky on my neck. Sap dripping down from above. Frank smiled. They like you, Bobby. They've been watching you. I reached into my pocket, fingers closing around my lighter. In one motion, I flicked it on and held it to a low-hanging branch. The dry needles caught immediately. Frank screamed, not like a man, but like wind through hollow trunks. The fire created enough distraction for me to run. Crashing through underbrush, I heard movement all around, not just behind me, but from the trees themselves. Branches reached for me, roots rose up to trip me. I stumbled into another clearing and froze. One of our volunteers hung suspended, his lower body already merged with a massive pine trunk. His eyes were open, aware. His mouth worked silently. Help! Me! He managed to gasp. I stepped closer. His legs were gone, bark growing upward over his hips. Roots had burst through his stomach, connecting him permanently to the tree. "Can you get free?" I asked, knowing the answer. He shook his head, tears streaming down his face. I can feel the roots inside me moving. I looked into his eyes and saw unspeakable pain there, and something worse, the fear of what he was becoming. "Please," he whispered. I raised my gun, hand shaking. "I'm sorry." After I ran without stopping, the sound of the shot echoing through the forest. Behind me, the whispering grew louder, angry now. They knew what I'd done. By the time I reached the ranger station, I was covered in cuts and scratches. Some were from branches. Others were from things that only looked like branches. I locked the door, pushed a desk against it, and tried to make sense of what I'd seen. But how do you make sense of trees that walk, of people turning to wood, of a forest that hungers? All I knew was that Frank was gone, replaced by something ancient and patient, and it wanted more. Dawn broke with a reddish light that barely penetrated the windows. I hadn't slept. How could I? Every creak of the old station sounded like footsteps. Every scratch of branches against the roof made me reach for my gun. I tried calling for backup on the radio. "This is Ranger Washington at Pisgah Station 7. We have a serious situation. Multiple missing persons. Request immediate assistance." The response came through with static. "Washington, this is dispatch. Are you injured? You sound stressed." "No, I'm not injured. But something's happening in Whisper Grove. People are..." I stopped. How could I explain? Just send help. "What exactly is the nature of the emergency?" The dispatcher sounded skeptical. "Missing hikers, hostile, entities in the forest." Even to my own ears, it sounded crazy. "Entities? You mean bears? Just send someone. We'll have a unit check. And tomorrow..." "Try to get some rest, Washington. Tomorrow would be too late." I knew that in my bones. I pulled out the old records Frank kept in his office, newspaper clippings, journals, historical documents. One yellowed article from 1862 caught my eye. "Militia vanishes in Pisgah Forest. 37 men lost without trace." Another, from 1923. "Forest fire claims no lives but ends mysterious disappearances." I dug deeper and found Frank's personal journal. The recent entries made my blood run cold. Day 3. Found strange growth on back of neck. Tried to cut it off, but no blood. Just sap. Day 12. Dreams filled with whispers now. They're teaching me things. The forest is so much older than we thought. Day 18. Becoming hard to write. Fingers stiffening, but clearer now what they want. Not to hurt us, to preserve us, make us part of something eternal. The last entry from just 3 days ago. Washington suspects something. Need to bring him in slowly. The Grove has chosen him too. I slammed the journal shut. My neck itched where sap had touched it last night. I ran to the bathroom mirror and turned my head. 3 tiny green buds were sprouting from my skin. "No!" I whispered, grabbing scissors. I cut them out, wincing at the pain. Instead of blood, amber liquid oozed from the wounds. I needed more information. I called Dr. Chen at the university, a botanist who sometimes helped identify plants for strange fungal growth and accelerated plant development. She sounded intrigued. "Send me samples." "No time," I said. "Ever heard of plants merging with humans?" Silence. Then, "Are you feeling okay, Ranger Washington?" "Just answer the question." "There are parasitic fungi that can control insect behavior," she said slowly. "And some plants communicate through underground networks. But what you're suggesting..." "What about historical records? Any legends about living trees?" She hesitated. "There's a Cherokee story about a grove where the barrier between worlds was thin, where spirits could take root in our world through the trees. They avoided that place. After hanging up, I drove to the nearest town. An old man at the local diner recognized me. "You work up at Whisper Grove," he said. It wasn't a question. "What do you know about it?" I asked. He leaned in close. My grandfather fought that fire in 23. Said afterward that the whispers stopped for decades. Said before the fire, folks would go missing every summer, always near the full moon. Tonight was the full moon. On the drive back, something hit me. Every major disappearance had ended after a forest fire. The pattern was clear. As I approached the station, I noticed the trees seemed closer to the road than before. The forest was literally closing in. Inside, I gathered everything I could about forest fires, protocols, equipment locations, containment strategies. Then I remembered my training in Vietnam. We'd used fire as a weapon there too. My radio crackled to life. Frank's voice came through, but different now, like multiple voices speaking as one. "Bobby," it whispered, "come back to the grove. We're waiting for you." I clicked the radio off, but it turned back on by itself. "The roots are already inside you," the voice continued. "Fighting only makes it hurt more." I touched my neck where I'd cut out the buds. The spots were tender, and when I looked at my fingers, they were smeared with sap. As afternoon faded into evening, I loaded my truck with everything I might need. Flares, gasoline cans, my service weapon, and a homemade flamethrower I'd rigged from a weed sprayer. The plan forming in my mind was probably suicide, but I couldn't just leave those people, or whatever they were becoming. The drive back to Whisper Grove took longer than it should have. Twice, I had to stop and clear fallen trees from the fire. A road. They hadn't fallen naturally. The cut marks looked like teeth. By the time I reached the campground, darkness was settling in. The area should have been full of weekend campers, but all I found were empty tents and abandoned cars. Personal belongings lay scattered. Half-eaten meals, open books, toys. I approached my ranger cabin, hoping to get more supplies. The door hung open, swinging gently though there was no breeze. Inside, the furniture had changed. My wooden desk had sprouted roots, anchoring it to the floor. The chair backs had grown twisted branches that reached toward the ceiling. On the wall, something caught my eye. Children's drawings, pinned where my maps used to be. Each showed the same thing. Stick figures standing among trees with faces. A noise outside made me freeze. Through the window, I saw movement. A procession of figures walking slowly into the deeper woods. Some walked normally. Others moved with the stiff, jerky motions I'd seen in Bill. At the head of the group was Frank, now barely recognizable as human. I ducked down as they passed, watching through the window. Among them were the missing campers, including children. One small boy turned toward my cabin, his face half covered in bark, eyes pleading. I had to follow them, had to see where they were going and what was happening. Maybe there was still time to save some of them. Keeping to the shadows, I trailed the group for nearly a mile. They followed no trail I knew, yet moved with purpose. We entered a part of the forest I'd never seen, where the trees grew so densely that branches interlocked overhead, blocking the moonlight. The procession stopped at a clearing. In the center stood the largest pine I'd ever seen, its trunk wide, enough that 10 men couldn't circle it with joined hands. The bark was twisted into patterns that looked almost like faces. Frank approached the massive tree and placed his hand against it. A shudder ran through the assembled crowd. "Tonight, we welcome new members to our family," he announced, his voice now a chorus of whispers. "Tonight the grove grows stronger." 2 men brought forward a struggling figure, one of the college students who'd reported his friend missing. They pressed him against a nearby tree. At first, nothing happened. Then the bark seemed to soften, molding around his back. He screamed as tiny roots pierced his clothes, his skin. "Don't fight," Frank said soothingly. "The first moments hurt, but then there is only peace." The student's screams turned to whimpers, then stopped altogether. His face went slack, eyes glazing over. The tree pulled him deeper, wood flowing over his limbs like water. I'd seen enough. I needed to get these people out. I stepped forward without thinking, calling out, "Stop! This isn't right!" Every head turned toward me. Frank smiled. "Bobby, you came back to us." He gestured at the massive tree. "Mother has been waiting to meet you." "Let these people go," I demanded, hand on my gun. Frank laughed, a sound like wind through dead branches. "They came willingly, just as the soldiers did once they understood." "What soldiers?" "The Lost Company. Union and Confederate both. They fought here, bled here, fed the grove with their blood and fear. Mother took pity and gave them new purpose." As he spoke, I noticed a young girl no more than 8 being led toward another tree. "Not the children," I said, drawing my gun. "The young adapt best of all," Frank replied. "Their minds are open to—" The sound of helicopter blades suddenly filled the clearing. Not real, just in my head. The PTSD episode hit me like a freight train. Suddenly, I was back in Vietnam, surrounded by enemies. I fired wildly, the gun's report echoing through the trees. People scattered. Someone screamed. I saw Frank moving toward me, his wooden fingers reaching. When my vision cleared, I was alone in the clearing, a park ranger with a smoking gun. I'd hit someone. There was blood on the ground, but not much. Just a few drops that quickly turned amber. I ran back toward the campground, mind racing. The evacuation had failed. I'd made things worse. Now they knew I was coming for them. Back. At my truck, I tried the radio again. No response. I was on my own. A rustling sound came from behind me. I spun around, gun raised. "Please," a small voice said. "Help me." From the shadows emerged the young boy I'd seen earlier, the one with bark growing on his face. He held out his arms. Thin roots were pushing through the skin, reaching toward the ground. "It hurts," he whispered. "I don't want to be a tree." "Come." "Here, son," I said, holstering my gun. "What's your name?" "Tommy," he said, stepping into the light. Up close, his condition was worse than I'd thought. The bark covered nearly half his face, and when he walked, his right leg dragged stiffly. "My Mom and Dad," his voice broke, "they're already trees. They don't talk to me anymore." I knelt down. "I'm going to help you, Tommy, and everyone else if I can." I lifted him into the truck cab and looked at his arms. The roots growing from his skin were thicker than before, some as wide as pencils. "Does it hurt when I touch them?" I asked, gently prodding one. He shook his head. "Not anymore. I can't feel much now, but I can hear things. The trees talk all the time." "What do they say?" Tommy's eyes filled with tears. "They want more people. They're hungry. They say soon they'll be strong enough to spread beyond the forest." I started the truck, but Tommy grabbed my arm. "Not that way. They'll be watching the road. We need to get you to a hospital." "It's too late for that," he said with the resigned voice of someone much older. "But I can show you what they do, where they take people to plant them. Every instinct told me to get this kid out of the forest. But he was right. The transformation had progressed too far, and I needed to understand what we were dealing with." "Okay, Tommy, where do we go?" He directed me down an unmarked fire break, deeper into the grove. We abandoned the truck when the path became too narrow and continued on foot, Tommy leading despite his stiff leg. "It's just ahead," he whispered eventually. We crouched behind a fallen log and looked into a narrow valley I'd never seen before. What I saw there haunts me still. Rows of trees, perfectly spaced, each with a human partially absorbed into its trunk. Some were freshly planted, still conscious, their limbs and heads protruding from the bark. Others were nearly completed, just a face visible, forever frozen in an expression of bliss or horror. "The nursery," Tommy whispered. "This is where we all end up." Movement caught my eye. Frank and several tree people tending to the crop. They moved between the rows, feeding the newly planted with something that looked like thick sap from buckets. "What are they doing?" I asked. "Feeding them," Tommy said. "Once you're planted, you can't get your own food, not until your roots grow deep enough." As we watched, Frank stopped at a tree containing a middle-aged woman. Only her face remained. Outside the trunk, her body completely absorbed. "How are you feeling today, Carol?" Frank asked. "Wonderful," the woman answered, her voice dreamy. I can feel the sunlight through my leaves. I never knew it could be so beautiful. Soon you'll be fully one with us, Frank said, stroking her cheek with his wooden fingers. Your consciousness will join with Mother's. What is Mother? I whispered. To Tommy, the big tree you saw. She's the oldest, the first one. She holds all the memories. A sudden commotion drew our attention. One of the freshly planted, a teenage boy, was struggling violently against the tree, consuming him. I don't want this, he screamed. Let me go. Frank approached him calmly. The panic is temporary. Your human mind fighting the inevitable. Please, the boy sobbed. I want to go home. Frank pressed his hand against the boy's forehead. You are home now. Something passed between them, a green glow that traveled from Frank's fingers into the boy's skin. The teenager's eyes widened, then slowly closed, his resistance fading. What did he do to him? I asked Tommy. Shared the collective mind, Tommy whispered. Once you see what they see, feel what they feel, it's hard to fight anymore. I felt sick. These things weren't just killing people, they were converting them, making them want to be consumed. As we turned to leave, Tommy stumbled, his leg now completely wooden from knee to foot. He fell with a crack that echoed through the trees. Frank's head snapped in our direction. Who's there? I grabbed Tommy and ran, no longer caring about stealth. Behind us, I heard Frank calling, We know it's you, Bobby. You can't stop the changing. We made it back to the truck, but Tommy was getting worse by the minute. The bark had spread across his chest now, and his movements were becoming stiffer. You need to burn it, he said as I drove frantically back toward the main road. Burn what? The nursery? He shook his head. Everything, the whole grove. It's the only way. There are people back there, Tommy. Some might still be saved. He looked at me with eyes that were beginning to cloud over with a green film. Not people anymore. Not for long. His voice had started to take on the same rustling quality as Frank's. I can feel her in my head now. Mother, she's so old, Bobby. She's been here since before people. I touched my neck where I'd cut out the buds earlier. Fresh ones were growing. Again, larger this time. You too, Tommy said, noticing my gesture. It's already starting. As we drove, I noticed roots growing from Tommy's body into the seat of my truck. By the time we reached the ranger station, he couldn't move at all. His lower body completely transformed into wood. I'm scared, he whispered as I carried him inside. I know, buddy. I know. I laid him on my cot and watched helplessly as the transformation accelerated. Within an hour, his arms had hardened into branches, thin twigs sprouting from his fingertips. Can you still hear me, Tommy? I asked. Yes, came his voice, though his lips no longer moved. The sound seemed to come from the rustling of the twigs, growing from his body. But I hear them too now, all of them, so many voices. Fight it, Tommy. Too strong. His eyes, now just knots in a face of bark, somehow still held expression. Don't let them take the whole forest. Promise. I promise, I said, my voice breaking. By morning, where Tommy had been, there was only a small, perfectly formed pine sapling growing impossibly from my cot. And on my neck, the buds had grown into small branches that I could no longer pull out without tearing my own flesh. I was running out of time. Each hour, the growths on my neck spread further. I could feel them under my skin, thin tendrils working. Their way toward my heart, my brain. Every few hours, I had to burn the visible shoots with my lighter. The pain was terrible, but watching Tommy's transformation had scared me more than any pain could. My radio came to life again. This time it wasn't Frank's voice, but a chorus of whispers. Why do you fight us, Bobby? Your kind cuts down forests, paves the earth, poisons the air. We offer harmony, eternal life. I smashed the radio against the wall, but the whispering continued in my head. I called my supervisor in Asheville again. I need a fire crew at Whisper Grove. Now. Washington, we got your messages. Rangers Phillips and Martinez are headed your way to check on you. My blood ran cold. Frank he's part of the problem, and there is no Ranger Martinez at this station. Martinez arrived last week, transfer from Olympic National Park. Phillips said you've been under a lot of stress lately. They thought I was crazy. And worse, something calling itself Martinez was coming, probably another tree person sent to stop me. Listen to me, I said desperately. There's something in these woods. It's taking people, dozens of them. Check the campground. There are abandoned cars, tents. Calm down, Washington. The team will be there in a few hours. Just sit tight. But I couldn't wait. By then, the roots might be too deep in me. And who knew how many more people would be planted tonight? I grabbed the ranger station's emergency protocols book and flipped to the section on forest fires. There were maps showing fire breaks, water sources, evacuation routes, everything I needed. Next, I broke into our equipment shed. Inside were exactly what I needed: drip torches used for controlled burns, cans of fuel, flares. I loaded everything into my truck. Then I remembered my Vietnam training. We'd used napalm there, gas mixed with soap to make it stick and burn longer. I raided the station's cleaning supplies and mixed up several bottles of homemade incendiary bombs. As I worked, the pain in my neck grew worse. When I looked in the mirror, my eyes had a greenish tint I'd never seen before. My skin near the growths had hardened, taking on a pattern like wood grain. "Get out of my head," I whispered. A voice that wasn't mine answered through my own lips. "We are offering you a gift, soldier. No more nightmares, no more being alone." I slapped myself hard. Not today. Before leaving, I wrote down everything I knew about the Whispering Ones, the nursery, Frank, Tommy. I sealed it in an envelope addressed to the Forest Service headquarters, along with coordinates to Whisper Grove. Then I called the local newspaper, Pisgah Times. "I need to report multiple missing persons in Whisper Grove," I said, not giving my name. "At least 20 campers disappeared this weekend. The rangers are covering it up." "Who is this?" I hung up. Maybe it would be enough to bring real help. If I failed, on my way out, I looked at the small sapling that had been Tommy. "I'll keep my promise," I told him. The drive back to Whisper Grove was harder this time. The road seemed to shift before my eyes. Twice, I nearly drove into trees that shouldn't have been there. My mind was playing tricks, or the forest was. Night was falling as I parked at the edge of the grove. I could see movement deep among the trees, processions of half people walking stiffly toward the nursery. Tonight would be another planting. I strapped on my gear, the makeshift flamethrower, drip torches, my gun, and the homemade bombs. Every motion hurt as the growing things in my neck pulled against muscle and bone. The whispers in my head grew louder as I approached the grove. "Think of what you're doing, Bobby. These trees have stood for centuries." "You're not trees," I muttered. "Not anymore." A rustling sound made me turn. What I'd thought was a bush stood upright, a humanoid figure made entirely of twisted branches and pine needles. Its face was just knots in the wood, but somehow I knew it was looking at me. It was one of the Whispering Ones in its true form. Not a possessed human, but the possessor itself. It reached for me with twig fingers. I backed away and pulled out the drip torch. With a flick of the lighter, the torch caught, its flame bright in the gathering darkness. The creature recoiled. From the fire, a sound like creaking wood coming from its body. "That's right," I said. "You're afraid of this." I set the creature ablaze. It writhed silently, branches crackling before collapsing into ash. Taking a deep breath, I moved deeper into the grove. The massive mother tree awaited at its heart, and with it, Frank and all the others he'd helped transform. For a moment I hesitated. Was I really going to burn down a national forest? Destroy living things, even if they weren't human anymore? Then I remembered Tommy's face as he changed, the terror in his eyes. "No choice," I said aloud. "They'll keep spreading." As if in answer, the tendrils in my neck twitched, sending bolts of pain down my spine. The whispering in my head grew to a roar. We are the forest. And soon you will be too. The deeper I moved into Whisper Grove, the more alive the forest felt. Trees swayed without wind. Roots rose from the ground trying to trip me. The pain in my neck grew with each step, as if the things growing inside me were fighting my mission. I started small, setting controlled burns at the forest's edge, just like we'd done for forest management. But these fires didn't behave normally. The flames struggled, as if the wood itself was fighting not to burn. Used more accelerant, and finally the fire caught properly. Orange light pushed back the darkness as the first line of trees began to burn. A terrible sound filled the air, not quite screaming, not quite wind. The trees were crying out. In my head, the whispers became desperate. "Stop this! You're killing us!" "You killed first," I answered, continuing deeper. As the fire spread behind me, shadows moved through the trees ahead, the half-transformed people and the whispering ones coming to stop me. I walked faster, staying just ahead of them, setting new fires as I went. My plan was to create a ring of fire around the heart of the grove, trapping the mother tree and its followers before burning inward. But as I placed my fourth fire line, a familiar figure stepped into my path. "That's far enough, Bobby." Frank stood before me, now barely recognizable. His body was more wood than flesh, branches growing from his shoulders, bark covering most of his face. Behind him stood others in various stages of transformation. "Move aside, Frank," I said, raising my flamethrower. "You're sick, Bobby," he said, almost gently. "The war broke something in you. We can fix that. Make the memories fade." Part of me, the part where the tendrils had reached my brain, wanted to believe him, to give in to the whispers promising peace. "You're not Frank anymore," I said. "You're just wearing his face." "We are more than we were," the thing that had been Frank replied. "Come join us at the mother tree. See the truth for yourself." More figures emerged from the trees surrounding me. Some I recognized as campers, volunteers, hikers. Others were like Frank, too far gone to be human anymore. They herded me forward toward the massive clearing with the mother tree. I let them, keeping my finger on the flamethrower's trigger. I needed to reach the heart anyway. The mother tree was even more impressive up close. Its trunk was wider than a car, with patterns in the bark that shifted like faces. The air around it hummed with energy. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Frank said. "Over 2,000 years old. It was here when the first people came to these mountains, watching, learning how to take us over," I said. Frank shook his head. "How to save us. Your kind destroys everything you touch. We offer eternity." He gestured and the crowd parted. A woman stepped forward, her transformation just beginning. Bark patches on her arms, small branches sprouting from her hair. "My wife," Frank said. "She came willingly when I showed her the truth." The woman's eyes had the same glazed look I'd seen in the nursery. "It doesn't hurt, Bobby," she said dreamily. "It feels like becoming more." "This isn't right," I insisted. "People should choose, like the forest chose." Frank's voice hardened. "When your kind cut and burned and paved, the mother tree learned that to survive, she needed to become more than just wood and leaf." As he spoke, I felt the mother tree's presence in my mind, ancient, patient, and hungry. I saw flashes of memory, axes biting into wood, saws cutting through trunks, bulldozers tearing up roots. "The Civil War soldiers," I gasped as another memory hit me. "They were your first." Frank nodded. "They killed each other among our roots, fed us with their blood and fear, taught us how humans work. We tried to save them, make them part of us, but we didn't understand your bodies then. Now we do." The crowd moved closer, forming a circle around me and the mother tree. Their faces were all the same, blank, peaceful, empty. "The roots are deep in you already," Frank said, touching my neck where the growth spread. "Stop fighting. Join us willingly." For a moment I wavered. The tendrils in my neck pulsed, sending waves of something almost like pleasure through my body. The whispers promised relief from the nightmares, from the memories of Vietnam, from the loneliness. Then I thought of Tommy, of the boy's fear as he was consumed. "There's something you should know about me, Frank," I said, my hand moving slowly to my pocket. "In Vietnam, we had a saying, 'When surrounded, bring the hell with you.'" I pulled out my final weapon, a glass bottle filled with gasoline and soap. Flakes. A cloth wick stuck in the top. Frank's wooden face couldn't show expression, but his voice held fear. "Don't do this, Bobby." Too late. I lit the wick with my lighter. Every creature in the clearing lunged toward me at once, but they were slow, their wooden limbs not built for speed. I hurled the bottle at the base of the mother tree, where thick roots pushed up through the soil. The bottle shattered. Flames erupted, catching fast on the ancient bark. A scream filled the air, not from any single throat, but from all of them at once. Frank and the others fell to their knees, clutching their heads. The mother tree's trunk seemed to writhe in pain. I felt it too, burning agony where the tendrils connected me to the collective. But I pushed through it, pulling out my drip torch and spreading more fire around the base of the massive tree. "Stop!" Frank's voice was desperate now. He grabbed my arm with wooden fingers. "You're killing us all!" I knocked his hand away. "That's the idea." All around us, the smaller fires I'd set were growing, joining together. The wind had shifted, pushing flames toward us faster than I'd planned. Smoke filled the clearing. Frank and the others tried to fight the fire, beating at flames with limbs that caught fire themselves. I emptied the last of my accelerant at the mother tree's trunk and stepped back. As the great tree burned, something happened to the transformed people. They staggered, confused, as if waking from a dream. Some screamed, seeing what they'd become. Others collapsed entirely, the controlling force gone from their wooden bodies. I backed away from the inferno, heading for the nearest firebreak. But I'd underestimated how quickly the fire would spread. The wind had picked up, carrying embers high into the canopy. Now the treetops were catching, creating a crown fire that raced ahead of the ground flames. My escape route was cut off. Fire surrounded me on all sides. Through the smoke I saw Frank stumbling toward me, half his body ablaze. "This forest has survived for millennia," he rasped. "It will grow back. And remember, a burning tree crashed down between us." I ran the only direction I could, deeper into the grove, hoping to find another way out. But everywhere I turned, fire blocked my path. My lungs burned. The growths on my neck were shriveling, dying as their source burned. But it wouldn't matter if I couldn't escape the inferno I'd created. I stumbled into a small clearing, completely surrounded by flames. Now, the smoke was so thick I could barely see. I dropped to my knees, coughing. Above me, through watering eyes, I saw the canopy ignite in a rush of heat and light. Beautiful and terrible. "I kept my promise, Tommy," I whispered as consciousness faded and the burning trees crashed down around me. I woke to the steady beep of machines and the sharp smell of antiseptic. My throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. When I tried to move, pain shot through my entire body. "Take it easy, Mr. Washington," a nurse said, appearing at my bedside. "You've been through quite an ordeal." Slowly, the room came into focus. White walls, medical equipment, tubes running into my arms. A hospital room. How? My voice was a raspy whisper. "How did you get here? Fire jumpers found you, said it was a miracle you were alive." She checked something on one of the machines. "You've been unconscious for 3 weeks. 3 weeks." The realization hit me like a physical blow. "The forest," I managed to say. "Whisper Grove." A shadow crossed her face. "The fire destroyed about 60% of it before they contained it. Worst forest fire in Pisgah's history." I needed to know more, but talking hurt too much. The nurse seemed to understand. "There's a federal investigator who's been waiting to speak with you. I'll tell him you're awake, but only a short visit, okay?" I nodded slightly, which made my neck burn with pain. Half an hour later, a man in a dark suit entered my room. He didn't look like a Forest Service investigator. His badge said FBI, Ranger Washington, he said, sitting beside my bed. I'm Agent Collins. Mind if I ask you a few questions about the fire? What could I tell him? The trees were capturing people, that Frank had turned into a plant monster, that a boy had transformed into a sapling in my cabin. Accident, I whispered. Was trying to help. Collins studied me. We found your letter at the ranger station, the one detailing unusual events in Whisper Grove. My heart sank. They thought I was crazy. 9 missing person reports were filed for that area in the week before the fire, Collins continued. At the nursery site you described, we found unusual formations in the trees, almost like human shapes. I stared at him. Was he actually considering what I'd written? We also found remnants of the boy you mentioned, Tommy Richardson. His DNA was identified in the sapling you described. I closed my eyes, relieved yet horrified to have confirmation. Of course, officially this fire was caused by negligence during an unauthorized controlled burn, Collins said carefully. You'll likely face charges once you've recovered. Understand, I whispered. He leaned closer. Unofficially, there have been similar incidents reported in other forests. Nothing confirmed, nothing we could prove in court, but enough to make some of us wonder. He pulled something from his pocket, a small jar containing what looked like bark and pine needles. This was embedded in your neck. Doctors initially thought it was debris from the fire, but it's not quite plant material as we understand it. Lab says the cellular structure is unlike anything they've seen. I wasn't crazy. It had all been real. Rest now, Collins said, standing. We'll talk more when you're stronger. The days that followed passed in a haze of pain medication and healing. The doctors marveled at my injuries. Not just burns, but strange wood-grain patterns across my skin where the tendrils had been growing. Places where bark had begun to form, but died when the mother tree burned. I was discharged a month later. As expected, the Forest Service fired me after an investigation found me responsible for the fire. My pension was gone, my reputation destroyed. Some local papers even suggested I might have harmed the missing people before starting the blaze. Agent Collins visited me one more time before I left the area. We're keeping an eye on the regrowth in Whisper Grove, he said, and similar locations across the country. They'll come back, I told him. Frank said the forest remembers. Collins nodded grimly. We've established a monitoring station. Any unusual growth patterns, and we'll know. It won't be enough, I warned. You need people who understand what they're looking for. That's how I ended up as an ecological consultant for a classified FBI unit. My official job was to help identify suspicious forest activities, drug operations, illegal campsites, that sort of thing. Unofficially, I was looking for signs of the Whispering Ones. For 10 years now, I've watched the regrowth at Whisper Grove and similar sites across the country. Most days, it seems like an ordinary forest recovery after a fire. New saplings growing, straight and true, wildlife returning. But sometimes, when the wind is right, I hear whispers in the young trees. And in certain spots, the pines grow too close together, in patterns that look almost like human forms when seen from a distance. The scars on my body tell their own story. Where the tendrils once grew, my skin healed with swirling patterns like wood grain. Sometimes they itch when I'm near dense forest, a reminder that part of me will always be connected to what happened. I keep a carefully tended bonfire at my cabin's edge every night, not just for warmth, but as a warning, as a promise, because the trees are growing back in Whisper Grove, and sometimes, when I'm checking the regrowth patterns, I swear I see a familiar face in the bark of a young pine, Frank's eyes watching me from the wood. The forest is patient. It can wait decades, centuries, but so can I. And next time, I'll be ready when the pines have eyes again. The cold bit into my left ear, the one I'd already lost feeling in years ago during that cursed Olympic race. But today's chill was different. Wrong. Like the mountain itself was holding its breath. My name is Eleanor Martinez. Ellie to the few people I let close enough, and I've spent my life in these woods. As I trudged through the fresh November snow, something felt off. Way off. The kind of off that makes the hair on your neck stand up even before your brain knows why. Compass is acting weird again, I muttered, tapping the glass face where the needle spun lazily instead of pointing north. Equipment malfunction was the last thing I needed with night coming and temperatures dropping faster than normal. That's when I saw them. Ice sculptures that weren't sculptures at all. Human-shaped figures, perfectly formed, scattered through the clearing like they'd been frozen mid-step. I'd never seen ice form this way in all my years patrolling Frost Hollow. I snapped photos, my fingers clumsy in thick gloves. The ranger station would want documentation, though I wasn't sure what. I'd tell them. Ice people sounded crazy even to me. My radio crackled, the static unusually harsh before Junior Ranger Hoffman's voice broke through. Martinez, you there? We've got a situation. Copy. What's happening? I kept my voice steady, the way I'd learned to control my breathing during biathlon competitions. 3 hikers from the university research group. They're 2 days overdue, and with this storm coming... I looked at the strange ice formations again, a pit forming in my stomach. What trail were they on? North Ridge, heading toward the caves. The caves. My grandfather had told me stories about those caves that I'd always thought were just meant to scare a little girl away from dangerous places. Now, I wasn't so sure. I'll take point on search and rescue, I said without hesitation. Have Hoffman meet me at the station in an hour and see if Jim Blackfoot's available to guide. Copy that, over and out. As I turned to head back, my flashlight caught one of the ice figures at just the right angle. For a second, just one, I could have sworn I saw a human face trapped inside, mouth open in a silent scream. I picked up my pace, not willing to admit even to myself that for the first time in 20 years of Forest Service work, I was scared. Of these woods, something was awake in Frost Hollow, something hungry, and 3 kids were out there with it. Back at the ranger station, I laid out maps across the wooden table while the wind howled outside. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees in just the hour it took me to return. Their last check-in was here, Hoffman said, pointing to a spot near the ridge trail. Young and eager with a baby face that made him look more like 18 than 23. Hoffman had good instincts. That's why I'd requested him specifically. Jim Blackfoot arrived as we were loading supplies. Tall and weathered, Jim knew these mountains better than anyone. His family had been here long before the Forest Service, long before the maps even had names for these peaks. Dr. Hayes is meeting us at the trailhead, Jim said, stomping snow from his boots. She's the student's advisor. I nodded, checking my rifle one more time. I never went into these woods without it, especially not with a storm brewing. We head out in 20. The drive to the trailhead was silent, except for the squeak of wipers fighting the building snow. When we arrived, a woman in an expensive-looking parka paced by her university SUV. Dr. Hayes, I stepped out, offering my hand. Ranger Martinez, thank God you're here. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp behind fogged glasses. My students are well prepared, but with this weather... We'll find them, I promised, though something in my gut twisted when I said it. We set out as the last light faded, headlamps cutting weak paths through the thickening snow. 2 hours in, we found their first campsite. This doesn't make sense, Hayes said, crouching by a nearly intact tent. All their gear is here, sleeping bags, food, even their research equipment. I swept my light around the clearing. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no drag marks, just emptiness, like they'd stepped away for a minute and never returned. Their tracks head that way, Jim said, pointing toward a line of pines. But there's something strange about them. He would right. The footprints started normal, then suddenly spread wide like they'd all started running at the same moment. What could spook 3 experienced hikers like that? Hoffman wondered. Before anyone could answer, I spotted something white against the snow, which should have been impossible given the fresh powder covering everything. A fox, perfectly preserved, its fur almost blue-white. I knelt beside it, my breath clouding in the suddenly frigid air. The animal looked like a taxidermy specimen, but when I gently turned it over, I discovered it was hollow, completely empty inside, like something had scooped out everything but the skin and fur. "I've never seen anything like this," Hayes whispered, her scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming her worry. Jim stepped back, his face grim. "My grandmother used to tell stories about this, a winter spirit that hungers, takes what's inside and leaves the shell." "It's probably just animals," I said, not believing it myself. "Unusual predator behavior." The temperature plummeted another 30 degrees in the space of minutes. My watch said it was now 20 below. Impossible without a major weather front. "We need shelter," I decided, trying to ignore how my compass was now spinning wildly. "The ice caves are half a mile east. We'll set up there for the night and resume at first light." As we gathered our gear, I noticed how Jim kept scanning the darkness beyond our lights, his hand tight on his walking staff. "Problem?" I asked quietly. He met my eyes, his face solemn. "The trails look wrong, Ellie. I've guided here 30 years, and these paths, they've changed." I wanted to tell him he was imagining things, but my own mental map wasn't matching up either. It was like the forest itself had shifted overnight. "Let's just get to the caves," I said, checking my rifle again. "We'll figure it out from there." None of us mentioned the strange cry that echoed through the trees as we moved out, too high to be human, too articulate to be animal. The ice caves weren't on any tourist map, but every ranger knew about them. Giant frozen tunnels carved by ancient water and wind. They'd offer protection from the storm that was now coming down in sheets of white. "Keep close," I called back to the group as we approached the dark opening. "These caves can be a maze." Our headlamps bounced off ice walls that glittered like diamonds. In better circumstances, it might have been beautiful. "Listen!" Hoffman stopped suddenly, holding up his hand. A faint sound drifted through the cave, someone moaning. We found Kevin. Jensen, one of the missing students, curled against a wall of ice. His expensive hiking gear was torn, his lips blue, eyes wide and unfocused. "Kevin!" Dr. Hayes rushed forward, wrapping her coat around him. "Where are the others? Where's Professor Winters and Lisa?" "So cold," he whispered, his teeth chattering violently. "It ate the warmth. It wore the professor like a coat." I checked his pack. He had all the right gear for the weather. There was no reason for his severe hypothermia. "Something's wrong with him," Hoffman said quietly to me. "Even in this cold, he shouldn't be this far gone." Kevin grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "The hunger that walks," he gasped. "It followed us, made us see things." Lisa ran toward her mother's voice, but her mother's been dead for years. Crash of falling ice echoed from deeper in the cave. Everyone froze. "We need to get him warm," I said, pushing aside the chill creeping up my spine. "Set up camp here. Hoffman, help me gather what wood we can find near the entrance." Outside, the storm had become a localized blizzard. I couldn't see more than 3 feet ahead, even though patches of clear sky were visible directly overhead. "That's not natural," Hoffman murmured, looking up at the weather pattern. "None of this is," I admitted. "Let's hurry." We managed to start a small fire in the caves. Mouth using the last of our emergency fuel, Kevin continued rambling about hunger and cold, while Dr. Hayes tried to get his temperature up. Jim pulled me aside, his expression grave. "Martinez, we need to leave at first light. Something is hunting here." "We can't leave the other students," I insisted. "I don't think there are other students to find," he replied. "Not anymore." I was about to argue when Kevin suddenly went quiet. He'd been babbling continuously for hours, so the silence was jarring. "Kevin?" Hayes leaned over him. "Can you hear me?" His eyes were fixed on the darkness beyond our fire. It's here, he whispered. We all turned to look, but nothing was there, just icy shadows dancing in the firelight. Taking the first watch, I sat with my back against the wall, rifle across my lap. The others eventually drifted into uneasy sleep, except for Kevin, who kept staring into the dark with wide, terrified eyes. Sometime in the deepest part of night, I must have dozed off, despite my best efforts. I woke with a jerk, instantly aware. Something was wrong. Kevin was gone. "Everyone up!" I shouted, grabbing my flashlight. Where the student had been lying was just a depression in the sleeping bag. A thin trail of frost led deeper into the cave, as if something cold had been dragged across the ground. "How did we not hear anything?" Hayes asked, her voice shaking. We followed the trail, weapons ready. The frost path ended abruptly at a wall of ice that hadn't been there before, a wall that completely blocked our way back to the cave entrance. "We're trapped," Hoffman whispered. From somewhere deeper in the cave came a sound that might have been wind, might have been breathing, and beneath it, just on the edge of hearing, what sounded like Kevin screaming. "There has to be another way out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady while examining the ice wall. It was at least 8 inches thick. We'd never break through it with what we had. "This wasn't here last night." Hoffman ran his gloved hand over the smooth surface. "How is that possible?" I didn't have an answer that made any sense. "The caves go deeper," Jim said. "They connect to an old mining tunnel about 2 miles in. If we can reach that, we can get back to the surface." "And Kevin?" Hayes asked, her voice barely a whisper. The scream had stopped. The silence that followed was worse. "We'll look for him as we go," I promised, though I was beginning to suspect we wouldn't find him alive. The deeper passages narrowed, forcing us to walk single file. Our headlamp beams caught strange formations in the ice, bubbles that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. The temperature's dropping again, Hoffman noted, checking his thermometer. "It's 30 below now." That was when we found Kevin, or what was left of him. His body was propped against an ice wall, frozen solid in a sitting position, eyes wide open and mouth stretched in that scream we'd heard. But the worst part was that he was hollow, emptied, out like the fox I'd found earlier. Next to him, arranged in a circle, were other frozen bodies. One was an older man in a torn university jacket. Professor Winters, I assumed. The third was likely Lisa, the final missing student. Jim stared at the arrangement, his face ashen. "This is a warning. The circle means danger beyond." "What did this?" Hayes whispered, her scientific skepticism finally cracking. A shadow moved. At the edge of our light, something tall and lean with too many points. Before I could focus on it, it was gone, moving faster than anything should be able to move. "Run!" I shouted, but there was nowhere to go except deeper into the cave. We rounded a corner and found ourselves in a large chamber. Behind us, ice began, forming rapidly across the entrance we'd just come through. "What the hell?" Hoffman breathed, watching the ice wall seal us in. "Everyone calm down," I ordered. "There has to be an explanation. Check your packs for anything we can use as tools." While searching, Hoffman found something stuffed in a crack in the wall. A leather journal, the pages stiff with age and cold. "June 1935, he read. "Third day in the cave. Thompson disappeared in the night. Williams claims he saw something following us, tall as 2 men with a deer's skull for a head. The others think he's losing his mind from the cold, but I've seen it too, watching from the shadows." We exchanged looks. 1935, nearly 33 years before our present year of 1968. "Williams is gone now too," Hoffman continued reading. "I found his clothes by the South Passage, empty like he'd just stepped out of them. The cold is different here. It's alive somehow. It hungers. If anyone finds this, stay away from Frost Hollow during the deep winter. It wakes entry ended abruptly, every 33 years, Jim finished quietly. "The legend says it wakes to feed every 33 years for 7 days. A scream cut through the chamber, Dr. Hayes's voice. though she was standing right beside me looking just as startled. "That wasn't me," she whispered. The scream came again, this time from another direction entirely. It was Hayes's voice, perfectly mimicked, calling for help. "Don't separate," I warned, but Hayes was already moving toward the sound. "Lisa, is that you?" she called. A blinding white flash filled the chamber. When my vision cleared, Hayes was gone. "Hayes!" I shouted. No answer came back, except the echo of my own voice. Hoffman's flashlight beam caught something moving along the high ceiling, a shadow with antlers, crawling like an insect across the ice. "Don't look at it," Jim hissed, pulling us toward a narrow side passage. "That's how it gets in your head." We ran, the temperature plummeting with each step. Behind us came a sound, like branches breaking, or bones snapping back into new positions. And even though I told myself not to, I looked back once. What I saw in that brief moment would never leave me. A skeletal figure stretched impossibly tall, its limbs wrong in every way, crawling after us with a deer's skull where its head should be. Ice crystals grew from its joints with each movement. It wasn't a man, it wasn't an animal, and it was gaining on us. The side passage opened into another chamber, smaller than the last, but with a ceiling so high our lights couldn't reach it. We collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath in the thin, freezing air. "What was that thing?" Hoffman wheezed. Jim pulled a flask from his coat and took a drink before passing it to us. "My people call it the Wendigo, a spirit born from hunger and cold." "That's impossible," I said, but the words sounded hollow even to me after what I'd just seen. "Explain what happened to Kevin then," Hoffman challenged. "Or that thing that looked like it was wearing a deer skull." Jim nodded grimly. "The legend says it was once a man named Jeremiah Frost. His expedition got trapped here in 1867 during a blizzard like this one. When their food ran out, he killed and ate the others. The Wendigo spirit took him then." I remembered the stories. My grandfather told how his own father had been part of a rescue team in these mountains back in 1902. 3 members of that team never returned. "If it's real," I said slowly, "how do we fight it?" "Fire," Jim replied. "It fears fire more than anything. The spirit may be immortal, but the flesh it wears can burn." While we talked, Hoffman had been examining the chamber walls with his light. "Guys, you need to see this." The ice was unnaturally clear in patches like windows. Behind them were bodies, dozens of them preserved in the ice. Men, women, some in clothes at least a century old, some in more modern gear. "My God," I whispered, recognizing a Forest Service uniform from the 1930s on one of the bodies. I wiped frost from the name tag. Martinez, my grandfather's brother, the uncle I'd been named after, who disappeared when my grandfather was just a boy. "They're all empty," Hoffman said, pointing his light to show how each body was hollowed out, just shells of what they had been. "It takes what's inside," Jim explained, "not just the flesh and organs, the spirit, the knowledge, the memories. It gets stronger with each feeding." I pulled my camera from my pack. "We need proof. No one will believe this otherwise." The flash illuminated the chamber better than our lights. In that bright moment I saw cave paintings on the wall opposite. The bodies, primitive images showing stick figures around a fire pit with something tall and antlered trapped inside. "It's a ritual circle," Jim said, examining the paintings. "Our ancestors knew how to contain it when it woke. They'd lure it into a ring of fire." The temperature suddenly dropped again. Our breaths came out in thick white clouds. "It's coming," Jim whispered. We huddled together, backs against the wall of frozen bodies, as the shadows in the chamber began to move on their own. "Stay calm," I ordered, though my own heart was racing. "Remember, it's hunting us. Don't let it separate us." Again, from the darkness came Hayes's voice. "Help me, please, I'm hurt." Then another voice, a young woman's. "Mom? Mom, is that you?" Hoffman stiffened beside me. "That's my mother," he whispered, "but she died when I was 10. It's not real." I gripped his arm. "It's using our memories. A third voice echoed through the chamber, an old recording playing in my head. The announcer from the 1960 Olympics, and Martinez approaches the final target, just needs this shot for gold. Oh, a controversial miss. The judges are reviewing. The voice was so real, so clear. I could feel the rifle in my hands again, taste the bitter disappointment as the gold slipped away on a judge's call. "Don't listen!" Jim shouted, shaking me. "Look!" On the far side of the chamber stood Dr. Hayes, or something that looked exactly like her. She was unnaturally still, her skin blue-white, eyes like glass. "Help me," the Hayes thing said, her voice perfectly normal, though her lips barely moved. "I found a way out." Jim shot forward, pushing Hoffman and me back. "Stay away. It's not her." The Hayes thing smiled, the expression cracking her frozen face. She reached toward Jim with fingers that were too long, too sharp. I raised my rifle and fired without hesitation. The bullet hit Hayes square in the chest. Instead of blood, she shattered like glass, exploding into 1,000 ice shards that fell tinkling to the ground. "An ice copy," Hoffman gasped. "It made a fake Hayes." But where's the real one, I wondered. That's when the Wendigo attacked from. Above, dropping from the darkness of the ceiling directly onto Jim. The creature moved so fast I could barely track it. One moment it was on Jim. The next, it had retreated back into the shadows, leaving him bleeding on the icy floor. "Jim!" I rushed to his side, Hoffman right behind me. A deep gash ran across Jim's chest, the blood freezing almost as soon as it hit the air. His eyes were wide with pain and fear. "Fire," he gasped, clutching my arm. "Remember, fire is the only way." I tore strips from my thermal undershirt to bandage him while Hoffman kept watch, his flashlight beam jerking nervously from shadow to shadow. "We need to move," I said, helping Jim to his feet. "Can you walk?" He nodded grimly, though his face had gone pale beneath his tan. "Not fast, but I can move." We made our way slowly through another passage, the ice walls narrowing until we had to turn sideways to squeeze through. The tight space made me feel trapped, vulnerable. "Look," Hoffman whispered, pointing ahead. The passage opened into what looked like an old mining operation. Rotting wooden supports, rusted tools embedded in the ice, and there, against one wall, was a stack of supply crates with U.S. Forest Service, 1935, stenciled on the sides. "My grandfather's expedition," I breathed, moving toward the crates. Inside the first one, we found exactly what we needed. Emergency flares, old but likely still functional, and several cans of kerosene for lamps. "There's a camera, too," Hoffman said, pulling out an old box camera with film still loaded. "And a journal." The journal belonged to Thomas Gray, the leader of the 1935 expedition. The final entry described how they'd tried to reach the surface after losing 3 men to the winter spirit. They'd planned to set a trap using fire, but the entry cut off mid-sentence. "Look at this," Jim called weakly from where he'd slumped, against a crate. He held up an old newspaper clipping dated 1902, a story about another missing group in Frost Hollow. 1902, 1935, 1968, I said slowly. Every 33 years. The developed film is still here. Hoffman had opened a metal canister. They must have had a portable darkroom. The old photographs showed 5 men posing outside the ranger station, then images of their camp, and finally, a blurry shot of something tall moving between trees, its antlered head turned toward the camera. The last photo made my blood run cold. It showed the same chamber we'd just left with bodies in the ice, but they were arranged differently, positioned to spell out words when viewed from above. "It never stops hungering." A whisper seemed to fill the chamber, though none of us had spoken. The air grew so cold, my eyelashes frosted over. "It's watching us," Jim whispered, his breath barely visible now, a bad sign that his body temperature was dropping. That's when I heard it, the sound of my coach from the Olympics. "Ellie, you've got this. Just one more perfect shot. Breathe. And squeeze." The voice was so real, so comforting. I found myself walking toward it without thinking. "Martinez!" Hoffman grabbed my arm. "Where are you going?" I blinked, realizing I'd been heading straight for a deep crevasse hidden in the shadows. One more step, and I would have fallen to my death. "It's trying to separate us," I said, shaking my head to clear it. "It gets in your mind somehow." "Mom?" Hoffman suddenly called out, his head turning. "Mom, is that you?" His eyes had gone distant, fixed on something only he could see. He took a step away from us. "Peter, no!" I grabbed him, shaking him hard. "It's not real!" He came back to himself with a gasp. "I saw her. She was right there, telling me to come home." A low moan echoed through the chamber, followed by the sound of ice cracking. From the passage we'd just come through, a figure emerged. Dr. Hayes. Her body bent at an unnatural angle, moving like a puppet on strings. "Help!" she croaked, her voice broken. "Cold! So cold!" Jim raised his walking staff. "That's not Hayes, not anymore." The thing that had been Hayes lunged with impossible speed. Jim swung his staff, catching it across what remained of her face. It shrieked, a sound no human throat could make, and retreated a few steps. I fumbled with the flares, finally getting one lit. The sudden red glare illuminated the chamber fully. What I saw froze me in place. The Hayes thing was connected to the ceiling by thin strands of ice, like a marionette. And above her, clinging to the cave roof, was the Wendigo. Bigger now, at least 12 feet long, its limbs stretched like taffy, antlers branching in complex patterns. It saw us seeing it and screamed, a sound that shattered ice across the chamber. Jim shoved me hard. "Run! I'll hold it!" "No!" I tried to grab him, but Hoffman pulled me back. "He's right!" Hoffman shouted over the creature's screams. "We need to move! Now!" The last thing I saw as Hoffman dragged me into a side passage was Jim, swinging his staff in one hand, one of our flares in the other, facing the descending Wendigo with defiance in his eyes. The passage collapsed behind us in an avalanche of ice, cutting off Jim's final battle cry. "Jim!" I screamed, clawing at the fallen ice, but it was no use. Tons of ice and rock blocked the way back. "Martinez, we have to keep moving," Hoffman said, his voice breaking. "He bought us time. Don't waste it." I knew he was right, but leaving Jim behind felt like failure. I'd been responsible for this team. Now Hayes was gone, or worse, and Jim... "This way," I said finally, turning away from the collapse. We picked our way through a narrow tunnel, the walls lined with strange blue ice that seemed to glow faintly from within. The air grew even colder, if that was possible. "I think we're going deeper, not up," Hoffman said after about an hour of climbing over ice formations. He was right. The pressure in my ears told me we were descending, not ascending toward the surface. There has to be another way, I insisted. The old mining tunnels connected to the surface at some point. We came to a fork in the tunnel. Both paths looked identical. "Now what?" Hoffman asked. I was about to suggest we try the right path when a faint voice drifted from the left tunnel. "Help! Anyone!" It was Jim's voice. Hoffman started toward it immediately. "Wait!" I grabbed his arm. "Remember what happened before? It mimics voices. But what if it's really him? What if he got away somehow?" I hesitated, torn between caution and the slim chance Jim had survived. "I'll check," Hoffman decided. "You stay here with the supplies." "No, we stay together," I insisted, but he was already moving down the left tunnel. "I'll be right back," he called. "Just going to look, 2 minutes." Before I could stop him, he disappeared around a bend in the ice, the beam of his flashlight fading. "Hoffman!" I shouted. "Peter, get back here!" Silence answered me. Then a scream, short, desperate, cut off suddenly. "Peter!" I sprinted down the tunnel after him, flare in one hand, rifle in the other. Around the bend, the tunnel opened into a small chamber. Hoffman was gone. A single boot lay on its side in the middle of the floor. "Peter!" I called, my voice echoing back mockingly. Something warm dripped onto my shoulder. I looked up slowly. Red droplets fell from the ceiling. Blood splattered across ice crystals 20 feet up, too high for me to reach. A smear led from the blood across the ceiling and into another tunnel. Something had taken Hoffman. Up. I backed away, gripping my rifle so hard my fingers ached. Alone now. Everyone gone. Just me and the thing hunting us. The smart move would be to find a way to the surface, to get help if anyone would believe me. But I couldn't leave Hoffman if there was any chance he was still alive. I followed the only other tunnel out of the chamber, moving as quietly as possible. The passage sloped upward, giving me hope it might lead toward the surface. After about half a mile, I smelled smoke, faint but unmistakable. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber, larger than any I'd seen before. In the center was the source of the smoke. A small fire nearly burned out, and beside it, slumped against a rock, was Jim Blackfoot. "Jim!" I rushed to him, checking for a pulse. He was alive, but barely. His skin was cold, his breathing shallow. "Trap," he whispered, his eyes fluttering open. "It led me here, wanted me to build the fire." "Save your strength," I told him, adding wood from my pack to the dying flames. The warmth felt like a miracle after so long in the cold. "Listen," Jim grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "The Wendigo, it's changing, growing. I heard it talking to itself in the dark, talking. It's not just animal anymore. It remembers. All the people it's taken. It has their memories, their knowledge." He coughed, a wet sound that worried me. "It knows. These caves, knows how to trap us." I looked around the chamber, really seeing it for the first time. The walls were lined with more bodies in the ice, dozens, maybe hundreds, men and women from every era, all preserved in their moment of death. "All Hollow, this is its lair," I whispered, "where it keeps them all." Jim nodded weakly. "Each one makes it stronger, smarter." He coughed again, blood flecking his lips. "It told me it needs one more, just one more to reach full power." One more what? Victim from each cycle. It's taken two already from this time. Hayes and Hoffman, I finished grimly. "But he might still be alive." I heard him scream, saw blood but no body. Jim shook his head. "Not for long, and once it has all three." "What happens?" "Don't know. Nothing good." He slumped further, his strength failing. "You need to kill it, Ellie. End this cycle." "How?" "Bullets don't work on it. Fire, lots of fire." He pointed weakly to the far side of the chamber where I could just make out crates stacked against the wall. "Mining supplies. Dynamite. Old, but might still work." His eyes drifted closed. "Jim, stay with me." I patted his cheek, but he didn't respond. I checked his pulse again. Still there, but fading fast. I covered him with my emergency blanket and moved toward the crates, keeping my flare ready. As I crossed the chamber, I found myself standing before the largest ice formation yet, a frozen waterfall that had been shaped to resemble a throne, and on it sat a collection of bones and antlers arranged in a mockery of a human form, the Wendigo's true body, waiting for its spirit to return. A human scream echoed through the chamber, Hoffman's voice filled with agony. I knew then I was running, out of time. The mining crates were just as Jim had said, old but intact. Inside, I found what I was looking for, 6 sticks of dynamite, yellow with age, but still solid. The blasting caps and fuse cord were there too, tucked in a tin box. My father had taught me about explosives during my summers working with his fire management team. "Respect the bang," he always said. These sticks were decades old, which made them dangerous and unpredictable, but they should still work. I was gathering the supplies when another scream tore through the chamber. Hoffman again, sounding weaker this time. The sound came from a tunnel high up the chamber wall, at least 20 feet off the ground. "Hold on, Peter," I whispered, though I knew he couldn't hear me. I returned to Jim, who hadn't moved. His breathing was shallower now, his skin like ice despite the fire beside. Jim, I shook him gently. "Jim, I need to know. How do I get up there?" I pointed to the high tunnel. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused. Climbing picks in the crates. I found them. 2 ancient ice picks with worn wooden handles. Not ideal, but they'd have to do. Listen, Jim's voice was barely audible now. Leave me, I'm done. But before you go, he pulled something from inside his coat, a small leather pouch. Protection from my grandmother. Inside the pouch was a strange black powder that smelled like sage and cedar. Burn it, he said. Creates a barrier the Wendigo can't cross. I nodded, tucking the pouch into my pocket. I'll come back for you. He managed a small smile. No, you won't. But you're kind to say so. His eyes drifted to the fire. I don't mind dying warm. I couldn't argue. We both knew the truth. Thank you, I said, squeezing his hand, for everything. I gathered what supplies I could carry. The dynamite, the picks, the remaining flares, and a coil of rope from the mining supplies. At the last moment, I took something else from the crate, an old miner's helmet with a carbide lamp attached. It would keep my hands free. The chamber wall was rough enough to climb, with plenty of handholds in the ice. I made it to the high tunnel entrance after about 10 minutes of careful climbing, the tools strapped to my back. The tunnel was narrow but tall enough to stand in, sloping upward into darkness. I lit the helmet lamp and started forward, my rifle. At the ready, though I knew bullets wouldn't stop the Wendigo. After several hundred yards, the tunnel widened slightly. The walls here were different, smoother, almost polished. That's when I found Hoffman. He was alive, propped against the wall, but barely conscious. His jacket was torn open, and across his chest were strange crystalline growths, like ice forming directly from his skin. Peter! I knelt beside him, feeling for a pulse. It was there, but slow. His eyes fluttered open. Me, Martinez? Is that really you? It's me. I'm going to get you out of here. He shook his head weakly. Too late for that. It marked me. I looked at the ice crystals spreading across his chest. They seemed to pulse with a faint blue light. What happened? It took me, dragged me up here, then it talked to me. His eyes were wide with remembered horror. Not with a voice. In my head. Showed me things, its memories, so many lives it's taken. What did it want? To know about us. About now. The Wendigo's been asleep for 33 years. It wanted to know what's changed. He coughed, ice crystals forming at the corners of his mouth. It's smart, Martinez. It learns. From each victim, remembers everything they knew. A sudden thought chilled me more than the cave. Hoffman, do you still have your service revolver? He nodded slightly. Holster. But it won't stop that thing. No, I agreed, carefully removing the weapon. But it might save you from becoming like it. Understanding flickered in his eyes. You'd do that, if it comes to it? I didn't answer, just checked the gun, loaded 6 rounds and tucked it into my belt. I found dynamite, I told him. Enough to bring down this whole section of the cave. If we can lure the Wendigo here, trap it, and us with it, Hoffman finished. No, there's another way out. Has to be. I showed him the map I'd been sketching in my notebook. If the old mining records are right, there's a vertical shaft that connects to the surface about half a mile from here. If we can reach that, I can't move, he said. These crystals, they're inside me, growing. I can feel them. I refuse to accept that. Let me try something. I took out one of the flares and lit it. The red chemical fire cast eerie shadows on the walls. Carefully, I held the flare near one of the ice crystals on Hoffman's chest. He gasped in pain, but the crystal began to melt, dripping away like wax. It works, I said, moving the flare over each growth. Fire weakens it. After several minutes, the crystals were gone, leaving red, blistered skin behind. Can you stand? I asked. He tried, leaning heavily on me, barely, but I can move. That's all we need. Come on. I helped him along the tunnel, following my rough map. The passage began to slope upward more steeply, a good sign. "You should leave." "Me?" Hoffman said after we'd gone about a quarter mile. "I'm slowing you down." "Not a chance." "Martinez, listen." He stopped, forcing me to look at him. The Wendigo whispered something else. "It marked me for a reason. It needs me." "What do you mean?" "It feeds on 3 victims each cycle. Always 3. With me, it completes the set. If I leave this cave, the hunger comes with me. It'll spread." I didn't want to believe it, but the certainty in his eyes was unnerving. "We'll figure it out." "On topside," I insisted. "Right now, let's just—" A low rumble interrupted me, like distant thunder. Then the temperature dropped so suddenly I could feel the air crystallizing in my lungs. "It's coming," Hoffman whispered. I pulled Hoffman into a side crevice just as the temperature plummeted further. Frost crept across my eyelashes, making it hard to blink. "The dynamite," Hoffman whispered. "Set it now." With trembling fingers, I unpacked the ancient explosives. The sticks were brittle with age, the fuse cord stiff. I worked quickly, connecting the blasting caps to 3 of the dynamite sticks and positioning them at weak points in the tunnel ceiling. "How long on the fuse?" Hoffman asked, watching the main tunnel where waves of cold air pulsed like heartbeats. "About 3 minutes once I light it," I estimated. "Long enough for us to reach that vertical shaft if we hurry." A sound echoed through the tunnel, part human moan, part animal growl. It was closer now. "It knows what we're doing," Hoffman said. "It has the memories of miners, engineers. It understands explosives." I finished wiring the last charge. "Then we need to move, now." I helped Hoffman to his feet, but as he stood, he gasped in pain. The ice crystals were returning, sprouting from his chest faster than before. "Go," he said through gritted teeth. "I'll light the fuse." "No, we're getting out together. Martinez, Ellie, look at me." He pulled his jacket open wider. The crystals had spread across his entire torso now, growing visibly. "I'm already changing. I can feel it in my head too. Its thoughts, its hunger." "All the more reason to get you out of here," I insisted, "and take this thing to the surface, to towns, cities." He shook his head. "I'm staying. I'll make sure it comes after me. You run for that shaft." Before I could argue, the cold intensified to an impossible degree. Ice formed on the tunnel walls, in sheets cracking and groaning with the sudden change, and then it appeared. The Wendigo was massive now, at least 15 feet tall, its limbs elongated like melted wax. The deer skull head had grown a crown of ice crystals that branched into complex antlers. Its eye sockets glowed with cold blue light. Most terrifying was how it moved, not like any living thing, but jerky and wrong, like a film played too fast, then too slow. "Go!" Hoffman shoved me hard, then turned to face the creature. I ran toward where I believed the vertical shaft would be, the sound of Hoffman's service revolver firing rapidly behind me. I knew the bullets wouldn't hurt the Wendigo, but they might distract it long enough. The shot stopped, replaced by a scream that didn't sound human anymore. I reached a junction in the tunnel and spotted what I was looking for. A vertical shaft, about 5 feet wide with old metal rungs embedded in the rock. Daylight filtered down from far above, a way out. I was just about to start climbing when I heard Hoffman call my name, not in pain or fear, but calm, almost conversational. "Ellie, I need your help." I turned slowly. Hoffman stood at the junction entrance, but his stance was wrong. Too still, too straight. The ice crystals had spread to his neck now, reaching toward his face. "Come back," he said in that same eerily calm voice. "I need help with the fuse." But his eyes told a different story. They darted frantically, at odds with his rigid posture and smooth voice. Behind him, shadows shifted in unnatural ways. The Wendigo was using him as bait. I raised my rifle, aiming not at Hoffman but at the dynamite I'd set. "I'm sorry, Peter," I whispered. I fired. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. The tunnel collapsed between us, cutting off Hoffman and whatever controlled him. Rocks and ice fell all around me as the shockwave hit. I scrambled for the shaft, grabbing the first rung just as the floor gave way beneath me. Pain shot through my right hand as two fingers caught between metal and falling rock, snapping them like twigs. I hung there, one-handed, as dust and ice particles filled the air. When it cleared, I looked down to see a gaping hole where the tunnel floor had been. No bottom was visible, just darkness. Despite my broken fingers, I forced myself to climb. 10 rungs, 20, 50, each one sending waves of agony through my hand. Below me, the shadows in the shaft began to move. Looking down, I saw ice forming on the walls, climbing toward me faster than humanly possible. The Wendigo wasn't trapped after all. I climbed faster, ignoring the pain, the cold, the exhaustion. My lungs burned in the thin air, my vision narrowed. To just the next rung, then the next. Finally, my head bumped against something solid, a wooden cover over the shaft exit. I pushed with all my remaining strength, but it wouldn't budge. Frozen shut or blocked by snow. The cold below me intensified. I could feel ice forming on my boots. Using my rifle butt, I slammed it against the wooden cover again and again. On. The fourth hit, it cracked. On the seventh, it shattered. Freezing night air and moonlight poured in. I pulled myself out onto the surface, emerging into a snow-covered clearing. The blizzard had stopped, stars glittering coldly overhead. I rolled away from the shaft opening just as a skeletal hand made of ice crystals shot up through the hole, grasping at air. I fumbled with my last flare, finally getting it lit. The sudden chemical fire was blindingly bright in the darkness. The Wendigo's hand recoiled from the light, retreating down the shaft. I crawled to the opening and dropped the flare in, hearing it bounce against the metal rungs as it fell. A shriek came from below, rage and pain mixed together. I wasn't safe yet. The flare would burn out in minutes, and the Wendigo would come hunting again. With frozen fingers, I opened Jim's leather pouch and scattered the black powder around the shaft opening. The strange substance glittered in the moonlight like tiny stars. Fire, I mumbled through cracked lips. It needs fire. I emptied my lighter fluid onto the powder and struck my last match. The black powder didn't just catch fire, it exploded into a ring of blue-white flame that surrounded the shaft opening completely. From below came a sound like no earthly creature could make, a scream of such rage and frustration it seemed to shake the mountain itself. The flames burned impossibly bright, somehow not dimming even as the wind picked up. Through the fire, I could see something moving in the shaft. The Wendigo trying to reach through, only to pull back as the flames repelled it. I staggered to my feet and looked around, getting my bearings. In the distance, I could make out the lights of the ranger station. As I started the long trudge through the snow, the last thing I heard behind me was Hoffman's voice. Not the calm, controlled tone the Wendigo had used, but Peter's real voice, young and scared. "Don't leave me here. Ellie, please, I'm still me." But I knew better. Peter Hoffman was gone, and in 33 years, the hunger would wake again. Nobody believed my story when I finally stumbled into the ranger station at dawn. I couldn't blame them. A monster made of ice that eats people from the inside out. They would have called me crazy too. The official report said an avalanche killed the search party. Hayes, Hoffman, Blackfoot, and the 3 students all listed as casualties. Only I made it back, half frozen and delirious with 2 missing fingers and severe frostbite. The medical team said I was lucky not to lose my left ear completely this time. Lucky. That's what they called it. They sent me to a psychologist who nodded politely while I told him about the Wendigo. He wrote acute stress reaction and hypothermia-induced hallucinations in his neat handwriting. I stopped talking after that. I didn't fight the official story. What was the point? The cave entrance had collapsed completely, whether from my dynamite or the Wendigo's rage, I'll never know. Without bodies or evidence, I had nothing but my word. I transferred out of North Frost Hollow as soon as I was cleared for duty. Requested assignment to Fire Management Service in Arizona, as far from ice and snow as I could get. My supervisors thought I was running from trauma. They weren't entirely wrong, but the nightmares followed me south. Night after night, I'd jerk, awake hearing Hoffman's voice begging me not to leave him. Or worse, I'd dream of ice crystals growing from my own skin, a hunger that could never be satisfied spreading through my veins. I kept track of the years. I knew what was coming. In my dresser drawer, I kept Jim's leather pouch, now empty. Occasionally, I'd take it out, run my fingers over the worn leather, and remember his final gift that saved my life. I never married, never had kids. How could I, knowing what was waiting back in those mountains? What would wake again when the time came? The nightmares got worse as the 33rd year approached. Sometimes I'd wake up to find frost on my bedsheets in the middle of the Arizona. Summer, a warning, a reminder. In January 2001, I returned to Medicine Bow. I was 65 now, my hair grey, my body slowed by time and old injuries. But my eyes were still sharp, my trigger finger steady. The ranger station had been renovated, modern equipment replacing the old radios and maps I remembered. The young rangers looked at me strangely when I asked about North Frost Hollow. That area's been closed to the public since the 70s, one told me. Too dangerous. Unstable ice caves. Good. Fewer potential victims. I didn't tell them why I was really there. Didn't mention the custom-made flamethrower packed carefully in my truck, or the barrels of fuel, or the new explosives, modern, stable, guaranteed to bring down half the mountain if necessary. I also didn't tell them about the letter I'd mailed to myself at the station, to be opened only if I didn't return. A letter explaining everything, warning about 2034, when the cycle would begin again. As I drove toward the old trails, snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier. The temperature dropped rapidly, my truck's thermometer falling 20 degrees. In minutes, too fast to be natural, it knew I was coming, and as I parked at the trailhead and shouldered my gear, I felt something for the first time in decades, not fear, but certainty. The Wendigo and I had unfinished business. This time, only one of us would leave Frost Hollow. I still see them in my dreams. Those things that shouldn't exist, those shadows that move on their own. It's been a year since it all happened, but I need to write it down before I forget, or before they come back for me. My name is Michael Thornton. Everyone calls me Mike. I'm a park ranger at Redwood Valley, have been for 3 years now. Before that I was in Korea. The war. I don't talk about that much. Don't talk about much of anything these days. It started on a Tuesday in July 1957. The fog was thick that morning, clinging to the ground like a white blanket. Strange for summer, but the weather had been odd all season. The massive redwoods towered above me, some reaching 300 feet into the sky. Their trunks were wider than my truck. "Come on, Rex," I called to my German shepherd. He's been with me since I came back from Korea. Smart dog, loyal, better company than most people. Rex bounded ahead as we followed the eastern trail. This part of the forest was quiet. Too quiet now that I think about it. The ranger outpost is 47 miles from the nearest town. Most days, I like the quiet. After what I saw in Korea, after losing Sarah and the baby, quiet is good. I noticed some weird tracks near Fern Creek. They looked like deer prints, but deeper, like something heavy had made them. I didn't think much of it then. Wish I had. Around noon, I helped a family find their way back to the campgrounds. The dad kept looking over his shoulder into the trees. "Something wrong?" I asked him. "Just feel like we're being watched," he said, laughing nervously. "These big trees play tricks on your mind, I guess." I nodded and smiled, but I knew what he meant. The redwoods create their own world. The local tribes used to say certain groves were sacred, places where the spirit world touched ours. Places they avoided. As the sun started to set, I made my last notes in the log. Deer running through campsites seemed scared of something, probably just a mountain lion. I didn't know then that the shadows were already watching, already hunting. Darkness fell that first night. I sat on the porch of my cabin, cleaning my rifle. Rex lay at my feet, suddenly alert, his ears perked up. "What is it, boy?" I asked. In the distance, something howled. Not a wolf, not a coyote, something else. Rex growled, the hair on his back standing straight up. The radio crackled to life. "Ranger Thornton, we've got reports of strange noises near campsite B. Can you check it out?" I grabbed my flashlight and hat. "Come on, Rex, duty calls." I didn't know it then, but that call would be the beginning of the longest 4 days of my life. I drove my truck down the bumpy service road toward campsite B. The headlights cut through the fog, making everything look ghostly. Rex sat in the passenger seat, still on edge. "Easy, boy," I said, patting his head, but he kept staring out the window like he could see something I couldn't. We reached the campsite just after 10 p.m. It was one of those family spots with a fire pit and picnic table. The campfire was still burning, flames dancing in the night, but there was nobody around. "Hello?" I called out, shining my flashlight around. "Park Ranger, anyone here?" No answer, just the crackling of the fire. I touched the coffee pot sitting by the fire, still warm. Whoever was here hadn't been gone long. 2 camping chairs sat by the fire, a half-eaten sandwich on a plate. It looked like the campers had just vanished. "Let's check the woods," I told Rex, clicking on his leash. "Find them, boy." But Rex didn't move. He just stood there, looking at the tree line, whimpering. I'd never seen him act like this before, not even when we'd tracked bears. "What's wrong?" I asked, as if he could answer. I gave his leash a gentle tug, but he planted his feet. His hackles were raised, and he kept making this low growl deep in his throat. "Come on, Rex, we have to look." He finally followed, but stayed right against my leg the whole time. We walked the perimeter of the campsite, my flashlight beam bouncing off the massive redwood trunks. That's when I saw the claw marks. Deep gouges in the bark, at least 8 feet up. Too high for a bear, too deep for a mountain lion. The bark was freshly torn, sap still oozing. "What the hell?" I whispered, reaching out to touch the marks. Rex suddenly barked, a warning bark, and I spun around, hand going to my holster. The beam of my flashlight caught something moving between the trees about 50 yards away. Just a shadow, there and gone. We kept searching for another hour, but found no sign of the missing campers. Just their empty tent, sleeping bags still neatly laid out inside. Their car was still parked nearby. As we headed back to the campsite, I almost tripped over something. I aimed my flashlight down. It was a deer, or what was left of one. Its chest had been torn open, organs removed. The strangest thing, there was no blood, not a drop. The ground around it was completely clean. I radioed it in. "Base, this is Thornton. We've got a missing person situation at campsite B. 2 adults. Signs of animal activity." "Copy that, Thornton. Need backup." I looked at the claw marks again, then at the mutilated deer. Something wasn't right. "No," I said finally. "But alert the sheriff's department. I'll bring in the personal effects for identification." That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind picked up around midnight, making the trees creak and groan. I kept thinking about those claw marks, about that shadow moving between the trees, and I kept thinking about what Rex had sensed, something that scared a dog who'd faced down bears and mountain lions without flinching. Just before dawn, my radio crackled again. "Thornton, you awake? We've got another situation. 2 hikers missing near Founder's Grove. Last seen yesterday afternoon." I sat up in bed, suddenly cold despite the summer night. It was starting. Morning came too quickly. I splashed cold water on my face and looked in the mirror. The scar on my cheek seemed redder than usual, a souvenir from Korea I'd rather forget. Rex paced by the door, anxious to get moving, but still on edge. I met James Cooper, and David Wilkins. At the ranger station, both junior rangers, good kids. Cooper was tall and lanky, fresh out of forestry school. Wilkins was shorter, stockier, with 3 years' experience. Both were city boys, though not like me. They hadn't grown up in these woods. The missing hikers are Tom and Lisa Brennan, I explained, showing them a photo the sheriff's office had sent over. Both 30 years old, from San Francisco. They were last seen heading toward Founder's Grove. Think they just got lost? Cooper asked, checking his compass. I thought about the empty campsite, the deer with no blood, the claw marks. Maybe, I said. Let's hope so. Founder's Grove was about 4 miles east, where some of the oldest trees stood. We took the main trail, Rex leading the way but staying closer to me than usual. Is your dog okay? Wilkins asked, noticing Rex's behavior. He's fine, I lied. Just didn't sleep well. The forest felt different that day. The fog hung heavier than usual, making it hard to see more than 50 feet ahead. And that silence. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. Just our footsteps on the path and the occasional drip of moisture from the trees. Around noon, Rex suddenly stopped, nose to the ground. He'd found something. It was a backpack torn at the straps, like something had ripped it off someone's back. I carefully opened it, finding a water bottle, some trail mix, and a small journal. I flipped through the journal. Most entries were typical, hiking notes, but the last one caught my attention. Day 3. The shadows here don't act right. Lisa thinks I'm crazy, but I swear they move when you're not looking directly at them. Something feels wrong in this part of the forest. We should head. Back tomorrow. Cooper was looking around uneasily. Mike, do you feel like... Like what? I asked when he didn't finish. Like we're being watched. I nodded slowly. Let's keep moving. Stick together. We continued deeper into the grove. The trees were massive here, ancient giants that had stood for thousands of years. Shadows stretched long and dark between them, even at midday. I saw something, Cooper suddenly said, his voice tight. Where? I asked, hand moving to my gun. By that big tree, tall figure. But when I looked right at it, it was gone. We searched the area but found nothing, no footprints, no broken branches, nothing. Let's keep going, I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. The day wore on, and we found more signs of the missing hikers, a dropped water bottle, a single hiking boot, but no people, and strangest of all, no blood, despite the torn backpack. And scattered belongings. The light began to fade faster than it should have. I checked my watch. Only 4:30, but it looked like dusk. We need to make camp, I said reluctantly. Too dangerous to hike back in the dark. We found a small clearing and set up a basic camp. No tent, just sleeping bags in a circle around a fire. I took first watch, rifle across my lap, Rex beside me. You think we'll find them tomorrow? Wilkins asked as he settled into his sleeping bag. We'll do our best, I said, not wanting to voice my growing fear that we wouldn't find them alive. The night grew darker. Cooper fell asleep quickly, but Wilkins kept tossing and turning. Rex stayed alert, head up, ears moving at the slightest sound. What is it, boy? I whispered. Then I heard it too, a soft rustling in the undergrowth circling our camp. Rex growled low, and I tightened my grip on the rifle. Wilkins, I whispered. You awake? No answer. He must have finally fallen asleep. The rustling stopped, then started again, closer now. Rex was on his feet, hackles raised. Eventually, my eyes grew heavy. Cooper was supposed to take the next watch, but I decided to let him sleep. I must have dozed off around 3 a.m. I woke with a start. Dawn was breaking, the forest filled with grey light. Cooper was sitting up in his sleeping bag, looking confused. Where's Wilkins? He asked. I turned to where Wilkins had been sleeping. His sleeping bag was empty, but that wasn't the worst part. There was a trail of dark drops leading from his sleeping bag into the forest, and small, 3-toed tracks I'd never seen. Before Wilkins was gone. Stay here, I told Cooper, my voice sharper than I intended. Guard the camp. What? No way, Cooper protested. We need to stick together. He was right, but I couldn't risk losing another person. Fine, but stay close to me and Rex, and keep your gun ready. We followed the drops on the ground. I didn't want to call them blood. Didn't want to think about what might have happened to Wilkins. The tracks were strange, three-toed like a bird, but bigger, deeper. No animal I knew made tracks like these. Rex was on high alert, moving cautiously, nose to the ground, but not pulling at the leash like he normally would on a trail. He was tracking, but he was scared. That scared me more than anything. The drops led us deeper into the forest, away from any marked trail. The redwoods seemed to close in around us, the fog thicker here. Our flashlights didn't seem as bright as they should be, the beams barely cutting through the mist. "Mike," Cooper whispered. "My flashlight's dying." I checked mine. The beam was definitely weaker. "Batteries must be draining faster out here," I said, though I'd just put fresh ones in that morning. We kept moving forward, the forest getting darker despite the rising sun. The drops on the ground were getting farther apart, but still led us onward. "Wilkins," I called out. "David, can you hear me?" My voice seemed swallowed by the trees. No echo, no response. Rex suddenly froze, a low growl rumbling in his chest. I stopped, holding up my hand for Cooper to do the same. "What is it?" Cooper whispered. I didn't answer. I was staring at something about 30 yards ahead, between two massive redwoods. At first I thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the light filtering through the canopy. Then it moved. It was tall, 7, maybe 8 feet, standing on 2 legs, but shaped wrong for a man. Its limbs were too long, too thin. Its head was stretched like a dog's skull, but bigger, wronger. And where its eyes should be, there was just darkness. "What the hell is that?" Cooper breathed. Raising his gun, the thing tilted its head as if curious. Then in one fluid motion it stepped backward into the shadow of a tree and vanished, like it had melted into the darkness. "Did you see?" Cooper started. "I saw it." I cut him off. Rex suddenly lunged forward, breaking free of my grip. He charged toward where the creature had been, barking furiously. "Rex, no!" I shouted, running after him. Rex reached the spot and leaped, but there was nothing there. He passed through the shadow and crashed into the base of the tree, yelping. In confusion, he spun around, disoriented, barking at shadows. Then we heard it. A voice calling from deeper in the forest. "Help, please!" It sounded like Wilkins. "David," Cooper yelled, starting forward. "Wait!" I grabbed his arm. Something felt wrong. "Help me! They're coming!" The voice came again, weaker now. Cooper pulled free and ran toward the voice. I chased after him, Rex at my heels. We burst into a small clearing. No Wilkins, just shadows and mist. "David!" Cooper called again. The shadows at the edge of the clearing seemed to thicken, to move. One detached itself from a tree and stretched toward Cooper. "Look out!" I yelled, raising my gun and firing. The bullet passed through the shadow with no effect. The dark shape surged forward, wrapping around Cooper's ankle. He screamed, firing wildly into the air as he was yanked off his feet and dragged toward the trees. I emptied my gun at the shadow, the flashes briefly lighting up the clearing. In those flashes, I saw them. 3, no, 4 shapes moving around. Us, dog-like but standing like men. Their skin seemed to drink in the light. Cooper was still screaming as he was pulled into the darkness between the trees. Then, suddenly, silence. "Cooper!" I shouted, reloading with shaking hands. No answer. Rex was going crazy, lunging at shadows, then backing away, whimpering. The shapes were circling us now. I could feel them, even if I couldn't always see them clearly. "Back off!" I yelled, firing a warning shot into the air. For a moment, the shadows retreated. I grabbed Rex's collar and ran, not caring about direction, just needing to get away. We crashed through underbrush, jumped over fallen logs, splashed through a small creek. I don't know how long we ran. My lungs were burning, legs shaking. Finally, I spotted something through the trees, the ranger station. Somehow, we'd circled back. We burst through the door, and I slammed it shut behind us, locking it with trembling hands. Rex was panting hard, scared in a way I'd never seen before. I collapsed into a chair, trying to catch my breath, trying to understand what I'd just seen. What had taken Cooper? What had taken Wilkins? As my breathing slowed, I noticed something on the window, marks on the inside of the glass. I stood up, moved closer. Paw prints, three-toed paw prints on the inside of the windows, like something had already been in here, walking on the glass. Whatever these things were, they had been here, in my station, waiting, and they would be back. Morning light filtered through the windows of the ranger station, but it didn't make me feel any safer. Rex lay by the door, ears perked up at every sound. I hadn't slept, couldn't sleep after what I'd seen. I picked up the radio. "Base, this is Thornton. Do you copy?" Static hissed back at me, then a broken voice. "The ton rep to I need help at Outpost 7. Cooper and Wilkins are missing. Repeat, Cooper and Wilkins are missing." More static than something else. Whispers mixing with the static. Voices too quiet to make out words, but definitely voices. I put the radio down, my hand shaking a little. I needed answers. The filing cabinet in the corner held records going back to when the park was first established. I started pulling folders, looking for anything unusual. Reports of missing hikers, strange animal sightings, anything. In the back of the third drawer, I found an old leather folder labeled "Incidents Restricted." Inside were yellowed newspaper clippings and typed reports dating back decades. 3 loggers vanish in Redwood Valley, 1937. Search party finds no trace of missing family, 1917. Strange beast sighted near Founder's Grove, 1897. 20 years. Every 20 years people went missing, and now it was 1957. One report caught my eye, a statement from 1937 given by a logger who was the only survivor of his crew. They came from the shadows, tall as a tree, thin as a rail, with dog heads, but standing like men. They took Jake first, dragged him into the darkness. They moved like they was made of smoke. Bullets went right through 'em. Only thing that scared 'em was when my silver lighter caught the moonlight. I remembered how the shadow had pulled Cooper away, how my bullets had no effect. The phone rang, making me jump. The landline still worked, at least. "Ranger Thornton," I answered. "Mike, it's Sheriff Davis. What's this about missing rangers?" I told him everything. The empty campsite, Wilkins disappearing from his sleeping bag, the creatures I'd seen take Cooper. Even as I said it, I knew how crazy it sounded. There was a long silence. Then, "Mike, I think you need some rest. You've been under a lot of stress since Sarah." "This isn't about Sarah," I snapped. "I know what I saw. Look, I'll send a deputy out to check on you, but it'll take a few hours with the fog. Just try to get some sleep, okay?" He hung up before I could argue. No help was coming. Not in time, anyway. I remembered something one of the old-timers had told me when I first started this job, about an elderly Native American man who lived alone at the edge of the forest, Joseph Blackfeather. If anyone would know about these creatures, it would be him. I grabbed my keys, whistled for Rex. "Come on, boy. We're going to see a man about some shadows." Joseph lived in a small cabin about 10 miles from the station. He was in his 80s now, one of the last full-blooded members of the tribe that had once called these forests home. As I drove, the radio kept cutting in and out, those whispers still mixing with the static. Once I could have sworn I heard Cooper's voice calling my name. Joseph was sitting on his porch when we pulled up, like he'd been expecting us. He was thin but straight-backed, with deep lines in his copper face and gray hair in 2 long braids. "Ranger," he nodded as I approached. "You've seen them, haven't you, those who walk between?" A chill ran down my spine. "You know about them." My grandfather told me the stories. They were once forest spirits, guardians, but they were corrupted when the White Loggers massacred our shamans in 1887. The shamans had been keeping the balance. What are they? I asked, sitting on the porch step. Shadow walkers, not alive, not dead. They hunt every 20 years, when the barrier between worlds is thinnest. He looked at me closely. They've taken your friends. I nodded, throat tight. They'll come for you next. They can sense your fear. Smell it. He reached into his pocket, pulled out something small, and handed it to me. A silver arrowhead on a leather cord. Silver burns them, bright light weakens them. But be careful, they are clever. They will use your own mind against you. How do I stop them? There is an old ritual site on Devil's Peak, where the Fire Watchtower now stands. It was built on sacred ground. He traced a pattern in the dirt with his stick. This symbol, drawn in silver, might trap them, but it requires blood. Your blood. I pocketed the arrowhead. Thank you. As I stood to leave, he grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. They will try to trick you. They can mimic voices, appear as those you've lost. His dark eyes bored into mine. Do not trust what you see or hear in the shadows. On the drive back, I couldn't shake Joseph's words, or the way Rex kept staring out the window, growling at the passing trees. Back at the station, I spread out a map of the park. Devil's Peak was about 15 miles from here, with the Fire Watchtower at its summit. If these shadow walkers really could be trapped there, I had to try. As I studied the map, I noticed something. The locations of all the disappearances over the years formed a pattern, a ritual pattern centered on an old tribal burial ground. And tonight would be the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, followed by short night. Outside, the sun was already beginning to set, even though it was only mid-afternoon. The shadows were growing longer, reaching toward the station like fingers. They were coming, and I had to be ready. The sun sank faster than it should have, like something was pulling it down behind the trees. I worked quickly, gathering everything. I might need to defend the station. Flashlights, lanterns, road flares, anything that made light. I placed them around the station, ready to grab. Then I checked the backup generator. It was full of fuel and ready to go if the power went out. Rex paced by the windows, his nails clicking on the wooden floor. Every few minutes he'd stop, stare into the darkening forest, and let out a low growl. I know, boy, I said, checking my rifle again. I feel it too. By 7 p.m. it was already darker than midnight should be. I kept all the lights on, but they seemed dimmer than usual, barely pushing back the shadows that gathered outside the windows. The radio crackled to life. Thornton, you there? Deputy Miller here. I'm about 30 minutes out from your location. I grabbed the radio. Miller, listen to me. Do not come here after dark. I repeat, do not approach the station until morning. It's not safe. What are you talking about? Sheriff sent me to check. The radio went to static. Then those whispers again, louder now. Words I couldn't quite make out, but they made Rex whine and back away. At 8:17 p.m., the lights flickered once, twice, then went out. The backup generator should have kicked in automatically. When it didn't, I grabbed a flashlight and headed to the small shed attached to the station where the generator was kept. The door was jammed. I had to put my shoulder into it once, twice before it burst open. The beam of my flashlight showed me why the generator hadn't started. Its fuel line had been cut clean through. And there were those 3 toed prints again on the concrete floor. They had been here, inside the station perimeter. While I was inside, I hurried back to the main building, Rex tight against my legs. The station felt different in the dark. Bigger, with more shadows, more places for things to hide. I lit the kerosene lantern on my desk, the flame casting a warm circle of light. With shaking hands, I pinned Joseph's silver arrowhead to my shirt. Then I waited. The first signs were subtle. Scratching sounds on the roof, soft thumps against the walls, the windows fogging up, then clearing. Rex sensed them first, turning in circles, tracking something I couldn't see. "Where are they, boy?" I whispered. A crack from overhead made me look up. The ceiling was splintering like something heavy was pressing down on it. I aimed my rifle upward, finger tense on the trigger. Rex suddenly barked, lunging toward the ceiling. At that same moment, a long, thin arm, much too long to be human, punched through the wooden boards. It was grayish-black, like smoke given. Solid form, ending in 3 clawed fingers that grasped at air. I fired. The bullet hit the arm, passed through like it was shooting at fog, and lodged in the ceiling. The arm withdrew, and the cracking stopped, but they were still out there. I could feel them moving around the station, testing, looking for a way in. The temperature dropped. My breath came out in white clouds. The lantern flame stuttered, nearly went out. Then I heard it. A voice I'd recognize anywhere. "Mike. Mike, please help me." Sarah's voice. "My wife, my dead wife. Mike, I'm so cold. Please let me in." It was coming from just outside the front door. Exactly her voice, with that little catch she always had when she was upset. "She's not real," I told myself, gripping the silver arrowhead. "Sarah's gone. Mike, please." The voice broke into sobs. "I'm scared out here alone." My feet moved without me telling them to. One step, then another toward the door. My hand reached for the lock. Rex suddenly slammed into my legs, nearly knocking me down. He barked furiously at the door, then turned and bit my arm, not hard enough to break skin, but enough to shock me back to my senses. "Good boy," I whispered, patting him with a shaking hand. "Good boy." The voice that had been Sarah's changed, becoming a low, angry growl. The door shuddered as something heavy threw itself against it. I backed away, raising my rifle again, even though I knew it wouldn't. "Help!" The temperature kept dropping. The lantern flame was barely a flicker now. Something dark seeped under the door. Not smoke, but something like liquid shadow. It pooled on the floor, then began to rise up, taking shape. A tall, thin shape, with a dog-like head and limbs too long for its body. Rex growled, backing away. I reached for one of the road flares I'd gathered, struck it. Bright red light flooded the room, and the shadow thing hissed, shrinking back. I advanced, holding the flare out like a weapon. Where the light touched the creature, its shadowy form seemed to burn and curl away. It retreated to a dark corner, but I could still see its outline. Its head tilted, studying me. Then it reached out one long arm toward me. I thrust the flare forward. The creature's arm brushed against the silver arrowhead pinned to my shirt. There was a sizzling sound like water on a hot pan, and the shadow drew back sharply. The flare sputtered, starting to die. I had more, but not enough to last the night. The shadow creature seemed to understand this. It waited, patient, just beyond the failing circle of light. And I could sense more of them now. Surrounding the station, waiting for darkness to return, the radio crackled again. This time I heard Cooper's voice, pleading for help, then Wilkins, then a jumble of voices all calling my name. I looked at my watch. 9:30 p.m. The night had just begun, and I was running out of light. That's when I made a decision. I couldn't stay here, trapped and waiting to die when the flares ran out. I needed to reach that fire watchtower on Devil's Peak. It was my only chance. I would have to make a run for it. Through the darkness, through them. I just hoped Rex and I would live long enough to reach the tower. I had to think fast. The flare in my hand was burning down, and the shadows were growing bolder. They seemed to pulse and shift just beyond the light, waiting. "Okay, Rex," I whispered. "We're going to make a break for it." I grabbed my backpack and started filling it with everything I'd need. More road flares, matches, first aid kit, rope, my silver ranger badge, which I pinned next to, the arrowhead, the map showing the route to Devil's Peak. The flare sputtered, nearly dead. I lit another one and tossed the dying one into the corner where the shadow creature lurked. It hissed and retreated. I hurried to the back room where I kept some personal items. There was a small jewelry box that held Sarah's silver necklace and earrings. I never could bring myself to get rid of them. Now they might save my life. I stuffed them in my pocket. At my desk, I pulled out a notebook and quickly wrote down everything I'd learned about the Shadow Walkers, their 20-year pattern, their weakness to silver and light, the ritual site at Devil's Peak. If I didn't make it, maybe someone would find my notes and be prepared when they returned. If you're reading this, I wrote, they're real. They hunt every 20 years. Silver burns them. Light weakens them. They can mimic voices of those you've lost. Don't. Trust the shadows. As I wrote, a plan formed in my mind. I couldn't just run blindly into the night. I needed a way to reach the truck, then drive as close to Devil's Peak as possible. The truck was parked about 50 yards from the station. On the roof rack were two powerful flood lamps I sometimes used for night patrols. If I could reach the truck and turn those on, I'd have a bubble of light to travel in. I checked my watch again. 10:15 p.m. The night seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. Here's the plan, boy, I told Rex, who sat watching me with alert eyes. We're going to wrap these silver items around the handles of the flood lamps. Then we'll make a run for the truck. I'll use the flares to clear a path. Once we're in the truck, we head for Devil's Peak. I knew it wouldn't be that simple, but I had to try. I opened the emergency cabinet and took out the small gas can I kept for the lawnmower. Not much, but enough to make a wall of fire if needed. The radio crackled once more. This time it was Deputy Miller's voice. "Thornton, you still there? I'm about 5 miles from the station now. Strange fog out here." I grabbed the radio. "Miller, turn back. Do not come here. I repeat, do not approach the station." Only static answered me. I cursed under my breath. If Miller came here, he'd be walking right into their trap. But I couldn't wait for him. My only chance was to reach that tower. I peered out the window. The shadows seemed thicker than before, moving in ways shadows shouldn't. Something large passed in front of the moon, and for a moment the night grew even darker. Now or never, I muttered. I put on my jacket, tied Sarah's silver necklace around my wrist, and loaded fresh bullets into my rifle. Not that they do much good, but the sound might startle the creatures enough to buy me a second or two. I lit 2 flares, handed Rex his leash, and stood by the door. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst from my chest. "Ready, boy?" Rex whined but stood firm beside me. I counted down in my head. 3, 2, 1. I yanked open the door and threw 1 flare as far as I could to the right, toward the tree line. Then I ran left, toward where the truck was parked, holding the other flare high. The night erupted with movement. Shadows peeled away from trees, from the ground itself, flowing like dark water toward me. They were faster than I expected, eating up the ground between us in seconds. "Run, Rex!" I shouted, sprinting for all I was worth. Something cold brushed my ankle. I kicked out wildly and felt my boot pass through empty air. The silver necklace on my wrist flashed in the flare light, and I heard that sizzling sound again. The coldness retreated. The truck loomed ahead, a bulky shape in the darkness. 20 yards. 10. A shadow rose up in front of me, blocking my path. Tall, with that wrong-shaped head and 2 long limbs. I didn't slow down. I lowered my shoulder and charged straight through it, feeling an icy cold pass over me like diving into a frozen lake. I hit the truck's door, yanked it open. "In, Rex, in!" Rex leaped into the passenger seat, and I scrambled in after him, slamming the door shut. Shadows swarmed the truck, pressing against the windows, making the glass fog up with cold. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys. The engine roared to life. I flipped the switch for the flood lamps. Nothing happened. No. I slapped the switch again. Still nothing. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw why. The wires had been cut, hanging loose beneath the roof rack. They had thought of everything. The windows were almost completely black now, covered in shifting, pressing shadows. The temperature inside the truck was dropping fast. My breath came out in white clouds. I still had the flare in my hand, burning bright. But not for long. The truck. I still had the truck. I put it in gear and stomped on the gas pedal. The truck lurched forward, crashing through the wall of shadows. I couldn't see much through the windshield, but I aimed for where I knew the service road should be. The shadows clung to the truck, making it hard to steer. It felt like driving through mud, but the truck kept moving, engine straining, pushing through the darkness. Then suddenly we were clear. The shadows fell away, left behind as we picked up speed. The road stretched ahead, visible in the headlights, but in my mirror I could see them, flowing like black water along the ground, following us, hunting us. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor and headed for Devil's Peak. The flare burned down in my hand, and I tossed it out the window. Now it was just me, Rex, and the headlights against the gathering shadows. And somewhere ahead, the watchtower that might be our only hope. As I drove, something caught my eye by the side of the road. A crumpled sheriff's car, its front end smashed into a tree. Deputy Miller's car. I slowed down, heart sinking. The car was empty, driver's door hanging open. On the ground nearby was a shape I didn't want to look at too closely, but I had to. I had to know. I stopped the truck, keeping the engine running and the headlights on. "Stay, Rex," I ordered and stepped out. It was Cooper, or what was left of him. His body had been arranged in a strange pattern, arms and legs twisted at impossible angles. His chest was torn open, just like that deer's had been. No blood. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. I stumbled back to the truck, sick to my stomach. I had known Cooper was probably dead, but seeing him like that, as I reached for the door handle, I noticed something carved into a nearby tree. A symbol, like the one Joseph had drawn in the dirt. This wasn't random. The Shadow Walkers were performing some kind of ritual, and I was heading straight for its center. I drove as fast as I dared on the narrow forest road. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness, but the shadows seemed thicker behind us, following like a wave. "Just a few more miles," I told Rex, who kept looking anxiously out the back window. "We'll make it." The road began to climb as we approached Devil's Peak. The engine strained against the steep grade, the old truck groaning with every switchback turn. Then, halfway up the mountain, the engine made a horrible grinding noise and died. I turned the key again and again. Nothing. Not even a click. "No, no, come on." I slammed my hand against the steering wheel. I popped the hood and stepped out with a flashlight. The beam showed me the problem right away. The fuel line had been cut, just like the generators. They had gotten to the truck while I was inside the station, preparing. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. We were still at least 7 miles from the watchtower, and now we'd have to go on foot. "Come on, Rex," I said, grabbing my pack. "We've got a long walk ahead of us." I took out a road flare, lit it, and started up the road. The red light created a small circle of safety around us, but I could feel the darkness pressing in, waiting for the flare to burn out. The forest was different here. The redwoods grew twisted, their massive trunks bent at odd angles. The fog curled around our legs as we walked, sometimes so thick I could barely see the road ahead. After about an hour of climbing, I realized something was wrong. The road didn't look right anymore. According to my map, it should have curved east, but instead it seemed to be leading us back down the mountain. "This isn't possible," I muttered, checking my compass. The needle spun wildly, unable to find. "North," Rex growled, staring into the trees beside us. I raised the flare higher, trying to see what had caught his attention. There, carved into the trunk of a massive redwood, was that symbol again. The same one I'd seen near Cooper's body. The same one Joseph had drawn. But as I watched, the tree seemed to shift, the bark rippling like water, and the symbol changed shape. "They're playing with us," I said, a chill running down my spine. "Changing the forest." I looked at my map again, trying to orient myself. Devil's Peak should be to the northeast. I could see its shape against the night sky, the watchtower a tiny silhouette at its summit. "Forget the road," I decided. "We're going cross-country." We left the road and started climbing directly up the slope. It was steeper this way, the ground covered with fallen branches and slippery pine needles. My flare was burning low, and I lit a fresh one, tossing the old one aside. As we climbed, the air grew colder. A wind picked up, carrying what sounded like whispers. The trees creaked and groaned around us, branches swaying even when the wind died down. Rex suddenly stopped, the hair on his back standing straight up. He was staring at something up ahead. I raised my flare, trying to see what had alarmed him. At first I saw nothing, then I noticed the trees. Every tree trunk around us was marked with claw marks, 3 parallel lines carved deep into the bark. They formed a pattern. Dozens of trees all marked the same way, creating a kind of corridor that led deeper into the forest. "Not that way," I said, turning to head in another direction. Rex whined, pressing against my leg. Then he growled, looking back the way we had come. I turned. The shadows were there, flowing between the trees like dark water. They were herding us, I realized, trying to drive us where they wanted us to go. "Come on," I said, picking a different direction. We scrambled up a rocky slope, away from both the marked trees and the flowing shadows. The flare sputtered in my hand, nearly gone. I reached for another one, just as the light died. In that moment of darkness, something rushed past. Me. I heard Rex bark in alarm, felt the cold brush of something against my face. My fingers closed around a fresh flare. I struck it, red light exploding around us again. Rex was facing away from me, hackles raised, growling at something in the darkness beyond the flare's light. I couldn't see what it was, but I could feel it watching us. "Easy, boy," I said, moving, to stand beside him. A storm was brewing overhead, thunder rumbling in the distance. The clouds blocked out the moon and stars, making the night even darker. We kept climbing, trying to stay on course toward the peak. But the forest seemed to shift around us, paths appearing and disappearing, landmarks changing when I looked away. "It's like they're bending the rules," I muttered, changing how the forest works. Rex suddenly barked, a warning bark, and sprinted ahead into the darkness beyond my flare's light. "Rex, come back!" I shouted, running after him. I heard growling, snarling, the sounds of a fight, then a yelp of pain that cut me to the heart. "Rex!" I burst into a small clearing. Rex was there, locked in combat with one of the shadow walkers. The creature was just as I'd seen before, tall, with that wrong-shaped dog-like head and limbs too long for its body. Its skin seemed to suck in the light from my flare, a moving patch of absolute darkness. Rex had his teeth sunk into what should have been the creature's arm, but his jaws seemed to close on nothing. The Shadow Walker made no sound, but its free arm swung toward Rex's head. I fired my rifle, the bullet passing through the creature without effect. But the sound startled it, giving Rex a chance to back away. "Rex, come!" I shouted. The dog started toward me, but another shadow rose up between us, then another. We were surrounded. Rex looked at me, and I swear I could read his thoughts in that moment. He barked once, then turned and charged at the Shadow Walkers, creating an opening in their circle. "Rex, no!" I screamed. But I knew what he was doing. He was giving me a chance to run, to reach the tower. I made a split-second decision that would haunt me forever. I ran. Behind me I heard Rex fighting, snarling, buying me time with his life. Tears streamed down my face as I sprinted up the slope, the flare held high. The watchtower was visible now, maybe half a mile ahead. I ran faster than I'd ever run before, lungs burning, legs aching. The backpack thumped against my spine with every step. Lightning flashed overhead, briefly illuminating the forest. In that flash, I saw dozens of shadow walkers flowing through the trees, converging on the tower ahead of me. Thunder cracked, so loud it felt like the sky was splitting open. Rain began to fall, fat drops that hissed when they hit my flare. I glanced back once. No sign of Rex, just darkness flowing up the hill behind me. He was gone. My brave, loyal dog was gone. And I was alone. The watchtower loomed ahead, a tall wooden structure rising above the tree line. A bolt of lightning struck nearby, briefly lighting up the entire mountain. In that flash, I saw dark shapes already climbing the outer walls of the tower. They had beaten me there, but I had nowhere else to go. I gripped the silver arrowhead around my neck, feeling its edges dig into my palm. If I was going to die, I'd make sure to take some of these shadow bastards with me. With a final burst of speed, I sprinted for the tower door. I reached the watchtower door and yanked it open, diving inside just as my flare sputtered out. I slammed the door shut behind me and dropped the heavy wooden bar into place. The inside of the tower was pitch black. I fumbled in my pack for matches, struck one with shaking hands. The small flame showed me a dusty room with a spiral staircase leading up. Old furniture was pushed against the walls, a desk, a chair, a filing cabinet. I lit the kerosene lamp I found on the desk and looked around. This had been someone's post once, where they'd watched the forest for fires. Now it would be my last stand. The lamp revealed a trap door in the ceiling at the top of the stairs. That would lead to the observation deck, where the fire watcher would scan the horizon for smoke. Right now it was my only way out if the shadows broke in. Something slammed against the door, making the whole tower shake. The bar held, but I didn't know for how long. Rain pattered against the windows. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating dark shapes climbing the outer walls of the tower. I hurried to the desk and started searching the drawers. There had to be something here I could use. The bottom drawer was locked. I smashed it open with the butt of my rifle. Inside was an old journal, its leather cover cracked with age. The first entry was dated June 1937. The last fire watcher, the one who'd survived 20 years ago. I flipped through it quickly, scanning for anything useful. Most entries were routine fire watch reports, but the last pages were different, frantic. Handwriting ink blotched with what might have been tears or rain. June 21st, 1937. They came from the shadows. Took my partner first. They move like smoke but can become solid when they want to hurt you. Silver burns them. Light weakens them. But they're smart. They cut the phone lines. Broke my radio. I'm trapped here. If anyone finds this, know that. They come every 20 years. The old ritual site beneath the tower is what draws them. The silver binding circle is the only thing keeping them out now. God help me. I looked at the floor. There, almost worn away by years of boot traffic, was a thin circle of tarnished silver embedded in the wood. It surrounded the entire room. That's why the shadow walkers hadn't simply flowed under the door. The silver circle was keeping them out. The windows rattled as the wind picked up. I could see them outside, pressing against the glass. They're not quite solid, forms leaving frost where they touched. A cracking sound from above made me look up. The trapdoor shuddered as something heavy landed on it. They were on the roof now, trying to get in from above. I grabbed the journal and climbed the stairs, keeping my rifle ready, though I knew it wouldn't help much. The trapdoor had a lock, but it was rusted with age. I braced myself beneath it, trying to hold it closed as something pounded from the other side. Lightning struck nearby, the flash shining through the tower windows. In that brief, bright moment, I saw them all around the tower. Dozens of shadow walkers, their elongated forms clinging to the walls, pressing against windows, reaching with two long arms. Then, in the thunderclap that followed, I heard a voice. "Mike, please help me," Sarah's voice again, coming from just outside the nearest window. I didn't look, couldn't look. I knew it wasn't really her. "You're not real," I said through gritted teeth. "Sarah's gone." "Mike." The voice changed, becoming Cooper's. "Why did you leave us, Mike? Why did you run?" Now Wilkins's voice. "You left us to die! You'll die too!" Rex's barking joined the chorus of voices. The sound broke my heart even though I knew it wasn't really him. "Shut up!" I shouted, pressing my hands over my ears. The pounding on the trapdoor stopped suddenly. In the silence that followed, I could hear soft scratching, like fingernails on wood. No, not fingernails, claws. I looked up just as a three-fingered hand punched through the trap door, sending splinters raining down. The hand was like smoke given shape, black and misty at the edges. It groped blindly, trying to find the lock. Without thinking, I grabbed my Silver Ranger badge and pressed it against the shadow hand. There was that sizzling sound again, and the hand withdrew with a jerking motion. A high, thin shriek came from above. The first sound I'd heard any of them make. I had hurt it. The silver had actually hurt it. The hand came through again, more carefully this time, staying clear of where I stood. I reached for the badge again, but the shadowy fingers were too fast. They found the lock and snapped it open before I could stop them. The trap door burst open. A shadow walker dropped down, unfolding to its full height, almost 8 feet tall, its head brushing the ceiling. Its face was a nightmare version of a dog's muzzle, stretched and wrong with no visible eyes. I stumbled back down the stairs, nearly falling. The creature followed, moving with a fluid grace that shouldn't have been possible for something so large. I fumbled in my pack, pulled out Sarah's silver necklace. I wrapped it around my hand and faced the creature. "Come on then," I growled. It tilted its head, studying me. Then it lunged. I swung my fist, the silver necklace connecting with what should have been its chest. The creature shrieked again, its form rippling where the silver touched it. But it didn't retreat. One long arm whipped out, catching me across the chest and sending me flying into the wall. Pain exploded across my back. The lamp fell, oil spilling across the floor. Fire bloomed, spreading quickly across the old wood. The shadow walker backed away from the flames, giving me a moment to catch my breath. I looked at the silver circle inlaid in the floor. It was supposed to trap them, according to Joseph and the journal. But how? More shadow walkers were dropping through the trap door now, flowing down the stairs like living darkness. The windows shattered inward as others broke through. The silver circle was keeping them from entering directly through the floor or walls, but not from the doors or windows. I was surrounded. The fire was spreading, eating up the dry wood of the tower. Smoke began to fill the room. I pulled out Joseph's arrowhead, remembering his words. "It requires blood, your blood." Understanding finally came. I cut my palm with the arrowhead's sharp edge, then pressed my bleeding hand to the silver circle on the floor. "I bind you," I said, the words coming from somewhere deep inside me, knowledge I shouldn't have had. "By blood and silver, I bind you to this place." The silver circle began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter. The shadow walkers froze, their misty forms rippling with what might have been alarm. "I bind you," I repeated louder now. "I bind you to the shadow between worlds." The circle flared, blinding white. The shadow walkers shrieked, their forms stretching and twisting. But they didn't retreat. Instead, they all turned toward me, dozens of eyeless faces focused on one thing, me. They flowed forward, surrounding me, their cold touch seeping through my clothes. I kept my bleeding hand pressed to the silver circle, kept repeating the binding words, even as I felt my strength fading. Lightning struck the tower with a deafening crack. The world turned white, then black. I felt the electricity course through me, through the silver, through the shadow walkers. Their shrieks became a single howl of rage and pain. My own scream joined theirs as the shock ripped through my body. The last thing I saw was the largest shadow walker, the Alpha, looming over me, its form burning with silver fire as the binding took hold. Then darkness claimed me. I was floating in blackness. Voices called my name from far away. Sarah's voice, Rex's barking, the voices of all those I'd lost. But another voice cut through, unfamiliar yet commanding. "Not yet, Ranger. Your work isn't done." I opened my eyes to blinding white light and the steady beep of hospital machines. I blinked against the harsh hospital lights. My throat felt like sandpaper, and every muscle in my body ached like I'd been hit by a truck. "He's awake," someone said. A nurse leaned over me, checking my pulse. "Mr. Thornton, can you hear me?" I tried to speak, but only a croak came out. She helped me sip some water. Where? I finally managed. County Hospital, she said. You've been unconscious for 3 days. The lightning strike nearly killed you. Lightning strike. The memories came flooding back, the watchtower, the shadow walkers, the binding ritual. The silver circle flaring with light as electricity coursed through it. Sheriff Davis appeared at the foot of my bed, hat in his hands. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "Welcome back to the land of the living," he said. "You gave us quite a scare." "Cooper," I whispered. "Wilkins, the hikers." Davis's face darkened. "We found Cooper's body near the road. Animal attack, worst I've ever seen. Still no sign of Wilkins or those hikers." "It wasn't animals," I said, trying to sit up. Pain shot through my chest and I fell back against the pillows. "Take it easy," the nurse warned. "You have 3 broken ribs and severe electrical burns." Davis sighed. "Mike, the official report says you were caught in the watchtower during a storm. Lightning hit the tower, started a fire. You're lucky those campers spotted the blaze and called it in, or you'd have burned to death." "Campers?" I asked, confused. "Family on Devil's Peak. They saw the fire and called for help on their radio. Rescue team found you unconscious on the floor, half burned. The tower's gone, just charred timber now." I stared at him. "You don't believe me, do you? About what happened?" Davis looked uncomfortable. "Mike, you've been through a lot. The war, losing Sarah. Sometimes the mind plays tricks when we're under stress." "It wasn't in my mind," I insisted. "There were witnesses. Cooper saw them too before they took him." "Cooper's dead, Mike. And the medical examiner says it was a bear attack." I knew there was no point arguing. They'd never believe me without proof. And all my proof had burned with the tower, the journal, the silver circle in the floor. "When can I get out of here?" I asked. "Doctor says maybe a week if you're lucky. Then you'll need rest." "I've already put in for your medical leave." "I don't need leave," I said. "I need to get back to my post." Davis shook his head. "Not happening, Mike. You're in no shape to work. Besides, we're moving the ranger station. That old building has too many problems. Faulty wiring, leaky roof. We're setting up a new one closer to the main campgrounds." Away from where it all happened, I realized. They were running away without even knowing it. "What about Rex?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Davis looked down. No sign of him. "I'm sorry, Mike." The days in the hospital passed slowly. My burns healed, my ribs knit back together. The doctors called me a miracle case, said the lightning should have killed me. I didn't tell them about the silver arrowhead they'd found melted into my palm, how it had somehow channeled the lightning's energy into the binding ritual. A week turned into 2, then 3. I was going crazy being cooped up, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw those shadow shapes, heard their whispered voices. Finally, they let me go home. Not back to the ranger station. That had been abandoned, as Davis said. Instead, I moved into a small cabin on the edge of town, close enough to civilization that people could check on me, but far enough into the trees that I didn't feel completely boxed in. I requested to return to duty. They denied it, citing medical concerns. I requested again, denied. The third request was approved, but only because they were short-staffed. 2 more rangers had quit, refusing to work in Redwood Valley after what happened to Cooper and Wilkins. My first day back, Davis called me into his office. "You're on light duty only," he said. "No overnight shifts, no solo patrols." And I got you something. He whistled, and a young German shepherd puppy bounded into the room, all ears and paws too big for his body. "Figured you could use a new partner," Davis said, watching as the pup jumped up on my legs. "His name's Max, but you can change it if you want." I knelt down, let the puppy lick my face. He wasn't Rex, would never be Rex, but looking into those eager brown eyes, I felt something inside me begin to thaw. "Rex Jr.," I said. I'll call him RJ. The days turned into weeks, then months. Summer faded into fall, then winter. I did my job, kept my head down. Nobody mentioned the shadow walkers or the hikers who were never found, or how Cooper's body had been arranged in that strange pattern. But I remembered. Every night, I remembered. I kept Joseph's notes about the ritual pattern, about the 20-year cycle. I mapped every disappearance, every strange incident. I learned everything I could about the history of Redwood Valley, about the massacre, of the indigenous tribes, about the corrupted forest spirits. And I prepared. Silver bullets loaded in my gun, silver charms hanging in my windows, powerful flashlights always charged and ready. The whispers never completely went away. On moonless nights, I could hear them in the rustle of leaves, in the creak of branches. Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I'd see movement in the shadows that shouldn't be there. RJ grew into a strong, brave dog. But sometimes he'd stare at dark corners of the cabin and growl, seeing something I couldn't or wouldn't. 1 year to the day after it all happened, I took RJ on patrol near Fern Creek. I didn't plan it that way. It was just the area I was assigned. But as we walked the familiar path, a chill ran down my spine, despite the summer heat. RJ suddenly stopped, hackles rising. He stared into the underbrush, a low growl rumbling in his chest. I drew my gun, the one with the silver bullets, and approached carefully. There, pressed into the soft earth, was a track, three-toed, just like the ones I'd seen a year ago. Fresh, the edges still sharp. I knelt down, studied it. RJ whined, pressing against my leg. Something moved in the shadows beyond the track. Just a flicker, there and gone, like a piece of darkness, shifting when it shouldn't. I stood slowly, backing away. My hand went to the silver arrowhead I still wore around my neck. The binding ritual had worked, I was sure of it. I had bound the shadow walkers to the watchtower site, but maybe not all of them, or maybe the binding wouldn't hold forever. 20 years, Joseph had said. They hunt every 20 years. But what if that was changing? What if they were coming back? Sooner? As RJ and I hurried back toward the ranger station, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching us from the shadows. Eyes that shouldn't exist. Watching. Waiting. I knew then that it wasn't over. The shadows had been walking these woods long before I came, and they would walk them long after I was gone. But next time, I would be ready. Next time, I wouldn't be caught off guard, because once you've seen the shadows move, you never stop watching them. Never.